I think we're close enough. I'd like to call to order this budget meeting, our council budget meeting for the town of Saugeen Shores for February the 4th, 2015. Welcome, everyone. Our first order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind you, if you have one, you can declare so now or when it is discussed. If there's none, then I think Kate's going to, oops, sorry. Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page 30 of 71, though it's not going to be likely to be discussed tonight, it is in the plan for the 5 years. And it's about line item number 48. So I started at annual programs and I counted the lines down. And it's 4 from the bottom. It says River Street, Arlington, Lennon Reconstruction. As this is a reconstruction in front of my property, I am declaring a pecuniary interest. Thank you.
Okay, so noted. Anything else? If not, I think our objective tonight is we're going to go over all the capital changes, and at the end we'll look at operating. Kate's going to go over what staff have done and some of the, also bring us up to date on where we are or fairly close with the 2014 year end or financial year ends. So, and I think I'll turn it over to Kate now.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of council. So our draft package really jumps right into just a high level 2014, our preliminary financials. So we've provided everyone with a spreadsheet. Variance summary was the title, and that basically shows in the first column what our 2014 budget figures were, and then where we stood for 2014 year end, along with the surplus and or deficit generated by each service area. I would like to really stress that these are preliminary figures. So these were probably early last week. We compiled everything we have known. That being said, there are still invoices coming in that relate to 2014. Specifically, we're still getting utility bills. We're still getting some major construction invoices for capital. So these aren't final by any means. However, I do think we're getting close. They're a good indication of where we were. And I know that we had received some questions, sort of how 2014 was looking. Are there any possible funds, perhaps a surplus generated from 2014 that could be helped to use to offset 2015? And I think that the moral of the story is that there isn't. As you can see from this summary, our current surplus is around $1,000. That is expected to drop as we get more invoices in, so we will probably be scrambling a little bit to fund that, but I don't anticipate that there'll be much difficulty there. And then we've just sort of summarized what's driving that surplus. So as you can see, we brought in $350,000 of supplementary assessment. This is unbudgeted. If every other service area was on budget, this should represent our surplus at the end of the year. And historically, that surplus has been transferred to the future capital projects reserved for capital. We have a surplus generated in fire, the combination of engineering and roads, cemetery, and police services. And those surpluses are offset by deficits created by fuel expenses. That's across the municipality, not just in one department. An emergency storm repair that was shared with Kincardine. This is the town's share of that cost. Streetlight hydro was slightly higher than budget. That being said, we are still expecting some West Ontario rebates. However, we'll apply those when they're received because we're not certain what the timing of those will be. The DC appeal, as everyone knows, was not budgeted for. There's almost $100,000 in legal fees. That did wrap up this year. A WSIB surcharge, the net overage in waste management, that's mostly due to revenues that were under budget. Miscellaneous overages, and then the net of community services, that's sort of all of those service areas put together. And a lot of that is utilities as well. So that brings us to a total surplus of $1,000. I didn't specifically address capital here. Capital is the one where our invoices tend to be even slower than operating. However, looking at it, again, from those tax-funded capital jobs, I did not see any significant surpluses in it. At the time that I did this analysis, I believe it was around $3,000 is what I identified as unspent funds. That being said, some of our bigger projects, some of our road reconstruction, there's still asphalt top layer to be done, so a lot of those are being carried forward. So we won't truly know any surplus or deficit generated by those projects until midway through 2015.
Vice Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps, Kate, a comment. One of the items that quite a few of them concern me in the package, but one of the ones on this sheet that caught my eye right off the bat was the $150,000 net community services. And then when you break it down even further, about a third of it, $50,000, seems to be related to the harbor. And yes, there was a situation that had to be addressed. However, what's concerning to me is that when we budget and we anticipate a revenue coming from a municipal business, i.e. the harbor, we actually include that in revenue and we spend that money in the budget process. So the budget kind of picks up that this is coming in, and then we have that available, we spend it. So when a situation arises like this, there's $50,000 that didn't come in as revenue, but we didn't correspondingly remove an item from the budget for the $50,000. So the $50,000 was spent and wasn't really then part of the harbor budget. I have some concerns about that, and I don't know how we think about it going forward, but I guess, part of it is that perhaps we shouldn't spend money that we don't know that for sure that we're going to have. And again, it was an extenuating circumstance with the harbor, but that $50,000 that went somewhere else, it's now just gone. And I'm not saying that it was spent frivolously or on something not important, but it's just if we hadn't had that $50,000 to start with, there would have been a different decision made. So I find that a little concerning because it was a bit surprising to see the community services number so high. But again, then when you break it down, there's some explanations there. But a business enterprise that the town runs is supposed to be run as a business. And in this particular case, I believe we're now putting some of the financial situation surrounding the harbor. The taxpayers have now gotten involved in this. And I don't know how we fix it going forward or how we pay a little more attention, but I'll be watching that because it's a little concerning to me. Thank you.
Councilor Rich.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Vice Deputy Mayor, do you think it'd be better if we took the revenues that came out of the harbor and out of the tourist camps and just put them directly into reserves, and then instead of actually spending them? I'm just curious, because obviously you're going down that road. I wonder what your thoughts are.
As I said, I don't know how we go forward. It's just, it was definitely there was a situation that caused this with the harbor because there was a big expense we hadn't anticipated. But there's it seems like there's changes in the way that, in particular, the harbor revenue budget streams are or revenue and expenses streams are playing. I just think that this was a big flag that we need to pay attention in a different way because. There's nothing wrong with maybe the taxpayers, the levy picking up something to do with the harbor, but it's not the way that it's been explained in the past.
Okay, just to wrap up with the 2014, I do want to make it clear that I will bring a very much more comprehensive year-end report to council, likely at the first or second meeting in March, and we'll go over all of our results as they are complete and look at all the transfers to reserves and the final reserve balances. So this is really just a preliminary idea of where we are, but by no means is it complete, and by no means is this all the information that you'll receive. So where we left off, for capital, our draft capital budget was reviewed the first time by council on December 9th. At that time, each staff Each manager presented and discussed each item, and there was a lot of discussion. However, at the end of the meeting, the budget as presented was still sitting at $8.9 million with $2 million funded from taxation. Without any changes, that would have resulted in a dedicated 7.6 increase to the tax rate. Previous council has expressed a desire to keep the tax increase dedicated to capital around 1%. With operating, our draft budget was reviewed just a couple weeks ago on January 13th. The meeting started with a proposed increase of 7.25%. Several motions were carried during the meeting which impacted the overall levy, and the meeting ended with an increase of roughly 6.25%. That increase, however, included staff's proposed changes to the capital budget to keep capital funding at or below the $1.25 million. So those proposed changes are discussed in the following slides, and we'll take time to discuss each one and hopefully have a chance to make a motion and to approve or decide otherwise. The goals for tonight's meeting are to review the proposed changes to capital and operating since those first draft presentations, to review and consider each change proposed by staff to the capital budget specifically, and to allow council an opportunity to make final recommendations for further changes to both the capital and operating budgets. So we'll get into capital. The proposed changes. The proposed changes to the draft capital budget have reduced the total budget from $8.9 million to $7.5. The tax funding component has decreased from $1.9 to $1,233,000, and this has decreased the dedicated tax increase allocated to capital spending from 7.6% down to 99.99 or 1%. So what my intention here is I'm just going to read through each item, give a little bit of background. In your packages, you have a detail sheet for each item. These were just drawn directly from that capital budget package that we looked at in December. So for your reference. Also, I've included the entire new amended capital budget, and all of these changes are in that as well, highlighted in yellow anywhere where there's an impact. And then once we go through each one of these, my intention is to come back to the beginning and give you an opportunity to discuss each one and provide some direction to staff whether or not you'd like that change to stay or be changed. I should mention I do have the sort of working copy of all of the budgets in front of me, so if we were to make a different recommendation, I can tell you what the impact of that will be. So the first item, the fire shed. We removed the fire shed. That was a priority C project, and that took $7,000 off the tax levy. We discussed this at the last meeting as it impacted our transfer to reserves. However, the pumper in 2015 was removed, as well as the aerial in 2016, and an added a quint unit in 2015, and this would be funded partially from DC charges and partially from the fleet reserve. The fire stabilization equipment is still in the budget. However, rather than funding that from tax, we've recommended that that be funded from the future capital projects reserve, so that saves $20,000 off the tax rate. In police, the renovation project, the existing building is still there. However, like that fire stabilization equipment, we're recommending that that be permanently funded from the future capital projects reserve, and that takes the $70,000 off the tax levy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, with regard to that particular project, Mr. Mayor, I noticed the total capital cost remains the same as the last time we looked at it. I know we raised the HVAC issue at that point. Has any further discussion been had at the staff level with regard to addressing the HVAC issue as part of this project? And do we anticipate that there would be increased capital cost if we were to address that issue?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, staff have a meeting tomorrow morning just to refresh exactly where we are in that respect. I believe we're confident that we can do the technical study required within the existing envelope of dollars, but frankly, no at this point in time if it identifies an additional capital requirement to retrofit or repair or do something else. There are no dollars proposed for that in the current capital budget for the current year. But we really have no sense, frankly, at this point in time, without that technical work being done, what to suggest. So that's frankly where it sits at the moment, and I think we'd have to address it. Obviously, if there's something relatively minor that we can do using operating funds during the course of the year, we'd look at that. Or if there's something more substantive, we have to come back to council mid-year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that answer, Larry. I guess my concern is I'd hate to see this renovation go forward. And if there were some technical improvements that were necessary that could be accommodated as part of the construction, see this go forward and not see the HVAC issue addressed at the same time. I just wonder, perhaps for some advice, maybe from Kate or from Larry, about there's also the $75,000 police building reserve. If HVAC projects were identified as part of your meetings over the next few days or in future, or as a result of the technical studies that you're referring to, would you envision it being possible or being feasible for council at that point to unlock some of that money to complete an HVAC project as part of this project before the other renovations go ahead, if that became necessary? If I'm not sounding like I'm out of my mind here, am I being clear?
You are being clear,
okay.
And we are also holding out hope that we might have a better idea by the time you get to finally adopt the budget later in March. So we have about a month to try and see if we can pin down a number that we might suggest to council at the very last minute.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The next item is
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we're also looking at a $6 million project in the capital budget for next year, correct? As an add-on to the police services building. Is that going to include any renovations inside of the current structure as well?
In a short answer, we don't know yet. We've put 3 proposals forward. One was an addition to the new building. One was an addition to the existing building. One was a new build, and one was a new build with ambulance attached to the side. So there's new build with ambulance is the $6.7 million project. The $3 million project was an addition to the old building, which included upgrades to the HVAC. For those that aren't aware, we feed off of this building. So when it comes to anything dealing with heating and cooling, we feed off of here. I suspect at some point during the study we'll find that a lot of heat loss, there's a lot of heat gain. There's a poorly insulated building that's underserviced by the equipment that we have. And I think eventually some engineer's going to say that and get paid a few dollars instead of me saying it.
Here, Mr. Mayor. I think you maybe see my concern of investing in a building 70,000 or towards 100,000 this year, and then maybe tearing it all out and then redoing again next year, and that's all I want to kind of have a grasp on.
Yeah. The $70,000 I'm asking for is just to simply create some space so we can breathe. It's got nothing to do with the HVAC. It is condensing storage. It's property storage. It's making room so we can actually walk around the police building. It's got nothing back. And I don't think any of the interior walls and storage things that we're looking at have any impact on heating.
Don't have any impact on the
heating or cooling system.
Heating or cooling. Luke was talking about heating and cooling, but I was thinking more about as it related to the expansion again for next year.
Anything that we're going to try to do with the renovation money within the inside of the building is only going to be an improvement on that building and will help down the road. It won't be money spent that way, and then why do we do that? It's all going to be our favor.
Figured it was thought through, but I just thought I'd ask. Yep. Thank you.
I'll go ahead with Neil, but I think the intent really was here that Kate will go through all of these, and then we'll go back to them individually and have the detailed discussion and question and answer on them, because I think we're going to get hung up here and not get through them all. But if you got a question, go ahead, Neil.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is high level, broader. It's, can we have an agreement in principle? Two questions. an agreement in principle that says reserves are equal to taxation? And then secondly, can we have these sheets changed in the future? The reserve column says tax reserves, differentiates between whether it's coming from taxation or it's coming from any other source. I grant that it could come from another source, but inherently most of our reserves are either overages or underages or whatever that, and they're moved to reserves and they end up being taxation. Is this not true?
I think we're set for this year, but if you want to discuss that and have these forms changed, then I think we can make a suggestion for the next presentation, however you want it. That's sure.
All right, moving on. The next item is the fuel management system. This is a carryover or continuation of a project that was started in 2014. Originally, it was to be funded from the tax levy. However, we've got that is now being funded from the fleet reserve, so that took $40,000 off the tax levy. Within roads and engineering, the Albert Street paving project, which I believe was $90,000, has been deferred to 2016. The concession 6 upgrades also deferred to 2016. The street lights, this is a split project between the town and the BIA for street lights. So the town's portion would be $31,000 and the BIA was proposing to contribute the other half. This has been proposed as deferred to 2016. Traffic signals, the UPS upgrades in for $20,000, I believe. We're recommending that half of that be funded from the emergency preparedness reserve, so that saves $10,000 off the tax levy. Under bridges, the McEwing Bridge design has been deferred to 2016. The rail trail lighting was removed. Under waterfront, the signage, that was $6,000. That has been deferred to next year. For other facilities, the Southampton Town Hall, originally we had $125,000 in the budget for exterior upgrades. That's been reduced to $50,000 to address just the steps and to remove the lighting. Within the downtown budget, the street furniture for both Port Elgin and Southampton, as well as the Southampton, I believe those were finger signs, have been removed. However, we've increased the priority ranking for the gateway signage, and that remains at $40,000 for Port Elgin. And finally, the last item on the list is that the police parquet project under parks has been reduced from $25,000 to $10,000. This was always funded from the future capital projects reserve. However, by reducing the scope and reducing the total project cost, we were able to reallocate some of those future capital projects reserve to other funds that were funded from tax. So there was a savings of roughly $15,000 off the tax levy. The impact of these changes, for your reference, is an additional $90,000 coming from the future capital projects reserve and an additional $10,000 from the emergency operations reserve. So I've included a reserve continuity spreadsheet with some of these changes highlighted in yellow just for your reference to see what those balances are. So my intention now is to go back to the beginning, so back to the fire station shed, and give you an opportunity to have your discussion and hopefully get an approval or some direction from council as to whether or not you'd like to go through with these changes or if you'd like to propose other changes. So I'll maybe pass that back to the mayor to lead that discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I guess now we'll go through these, and I don't know, do you want to go through them all and discuss them and then vote on them at the end, or do you want to vote on them individually? What's your suggestions? Okay, as we go, we'll discuss them, and then when we're finished, then we'll ask for a show of hands whether the recommendation is approved. Okay. Any questions or comments on the removal of the storage shed for Station 50?
As it's been identified, if in fact it does get removed tonight, does it then prevent a community organization from getting behind an individual fundraising event to say that that was a worthy project and we'd like to go ahead with it?
Not a bit. Not a bit. Any other questions? Okay. I'll ask the question, and the question is, who supports removing the storage shed renovation at Station 50 for a total cost of $7,000? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Okay, the next one is the fleet. Remove the pumperl and aerial and added quint. There is some detail on page 51 of the agenda if you're interested.
Do we know what color it will be?
Philip can tell you that.
In all seriousness, we're looking for an already built truck, so we might have to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like the fire chief to 100% assure us that losing a fleet item is okay, because we have a fire services master plan, we have an official plan that's projecting growth, and just I know you have made comments, but it's in many ways it can be perceived as a service reduction. So just a couple of comments will help the explanation, because losing a fire truck doesn't sound good to people.
This isn't a decision we entered into lightly, and it was several years to explore what our trucks were doing for us. The trucks we have currently in service, a lot of them came from amalgamation. Kept the best, if you will, build the halls. This is really, this proposal allows us back to get to the right size, not going to reduce the level of service. In fact, the capability of this truck will actually increase what we have capacity-wise, burial, that kind of thing. Basically share one spare pumper between halls instead of each hall having a spare pumper, or when it's out of service or requires repair. So to answer the question more directly, it will not impact the level of service.
Okay, any other questions? Ready for the question? This is a little bit more money. Usually these ones go faster. No, so I guess the way I'll phrase it is all in favor of the proposed change to the budget, which is remove pumper and aerial and added quint. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Next is the fire fund stabilization equipment from future capital project reserves, and that item is on page 52, I believe, right? Yes. Look at the next page if you're following. Any questions? If not, then all in favor of that recommendation? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Next is police renovations from future capital project reserves. $1, I believe, yes. Questions to this? Now's the time to vote. Dan's left. Got your. Anybody want? Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, along the same lines as Councillor John Rich, my concern is that we would do this work, and then within a year we will have it a decision to spend money on doing something that will equal or better this work. And so it's about planning and it's about getting it done. I get that, but to me it says if we're doing this work now, then we're probably going to delay the decision maybe 2 or 3 years down the road before the police department gets all its wants and needs in a new building. So one's trading off for the other, and I don't know which is the right answer. Thank you.
Okay. You want to speak to it? Or do you want to speak to it, Luke? Sure, we'll go here. Or go ahead, Dan, and then we'll get to Luke.
I think, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In all honesty, I think the intention here is to, we're all aware the police service is having difficulty in its current facility, that it's got a series of inadequacies, and the intention here is to address some of those inadequacies. I'd like to address a few more of the inadequacies than have been addressed in here, and I mentioned that before. But it's also to give us some time, to deal with the larger issue that is currently as a placeholder in the draft 5-year capital plan. But I think I think it's pretty clear when you look around here and some of the things that we're talking about, and some of the plans that we have, that we're going to need some more time before we can free up the cash that would be needed to do the big EMS police project that we've been discussing the last couple of years. So I think, to be perfectly honest about it, I think that's what we're doing here. We're giving the police a building they can use for the next few years, and trying to put council in a position where it can line up some of these priorities and finance some of them over time. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councilor Grace. Sorry.
No, I through you, Mr. Mayor, I remember during the tour, I support this expenditure, but I remember it's not just a matter, I think it's important for people to know from what you explained, that it's not just a convenience situation in terms of storage issues. One of the things I think you explained to us is that you have a duty to store pieces of evidence safely. It could open us up to some kind of possible liability if we didn't have that, and I think we have a responsibility to make sure.
Speak to it, Dan.
Just real briefly, I became chief in 2006, and what I've been trying to do since then was work on this project. And in 2008, we started doing it in earnest. And we have come forward with a few different projects. And as we did it, I actually 100% honestly felt that we were going to be doing something in 2013, and then 2014, and then 2015. And now we're looking into 2015, and I'm just saying I need a huge Band-Aid to help me get past that, because I needed this stuff done 3 years ago. So it's not, in my mind, it's not a huge expense, but it's not something that is going to be throwing good money after bad, because any of the stuff that we're going to be doing in there is just bettering the building itself. So I think it is something that is going to buy you a little bit of time so we can figure out how to move forward.
Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm not going to call you the first name because
there's only one of us.
That's
here.
Right.
You borrowed the phrase I was going to use, which is good money after bad, and I don't think this is a case of that, because what I've heard is that the building would be repurposed if we get to a situation where we build Selection A or Selection B, which is a new build or a double new build. But I haven't ever heard, what are we going to repurpose it for? Is there a plan of which department's going to take over this building, or? Oh, it's competition. There's lots of contenders. Oh, sorry. Okay, we'll wait to see how that unfolds.
I think there's probably some opportunities, and we'd have that discussion, I'm sure. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I think we ought to be perfectly clear, though. I mean, there's a large number of options, including one option that was on the table a couple years ago, is that it would be that the building itself would be expanded and continue to be used as a police building. So I think it's important to note that there is no plan. There is no plan. So it could be anything. Anything it could happen, and there's lots of different options, and all the options are on the table. So I guess it's just important to be very clear about that. I think so. There's no expectations of something that isn't out there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I hope the press got the Deputy Mayor saying there is no plan. That would be the quote that you all want to repeat.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Then I guess the question is, do we fund the police renovation from future capital reserves, project reserves to the tune of $70,000? All in favor of that? Opposed, if any? That's carried. The next item is fleet. It's the fuel management system from fleet, and it's recommended that we fund this from fleet reserves to the tune of $40,000. Comments, questions? Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I don't believe this has been asked before, but Stuart, is there any, when it says to install new tanks, I'm assuming that there's old tanks that are being decommissioned. Is there any market for used tanks that are of the size that would be coming out of here? Any chance they could be used to improve the situation?
Okay. Any other questions? So then I guess the question is, do we support funding the fuel management system from the fleet reserve in the amount of $40,000? All in favor of that? Opposed, if any? That's carried. The next item then is to defer the Albert Street paving. That one is $90,000. 80 from the levy and 9,600 from the reserve. Go ahead, Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
This is a section of road that actually isn't that old, and so it's not. I realize it's got some kind of rating on it here, which someday Stuart's going to let me see his nice rating chart so I understand those numbers better. I don't see a challenge with pushing this reconstruction out.
Okay, do you want to explain that so everybody understands what the PCI rating is?
Sure. So it's a pavement condition index, and it's based on about 10 different criteria. Then it's summed up in the end, and it's just a number of 100. So there's about 10 different multiples of 10, and I can certainly give council a chart as how that's calculated. It's mostly based on observations and by staff.
And maybe, so the index, how do you use it? When would you say that it would be time to resurface or completely rebuild, or those numbers, or it's just kind of a...
No, we have some given numbers in the asset management plan between 60 and 80, depending if you're replacing, rebuilding, rehabilitating. So there's some different thresholds there, and also depending on the surface, the subgrade, and a bunch of different factors. Mm-hmm. On that particular job, we have yet to put surface coat on that project. If you look at the curb on the west side, there's still 1.5 inch lip there because we still have not yet put surface course on that chunk of road. So that's why that project was in there.
Okay. Oh, just for clarification then, that would be that last lift that we're deferring again? Okay. For 1 year. One concern I have with it is the lines there are very confusing. Right on around the corner at the end of Albert Street there. Maybe I'm off here. No. Yep. Yeah. Okay. So then, I guess the question is, who's in favor of deferring the Albert Street paving for a total of $90,000 sourced from 2 different sources? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next item is defer the concession 6 upgrades. Yeah, that's about $1 million. So, questions to this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that we've heard about changes to Bruce Road 25 and Bruce Road 33, and this is an extension of this in the easterly direction, right? This could be something that could all be put into one big plan for that whole road area, and I'd like to see it deferred into the Bruce Road 33 and the Bruce Road 25 plan with the Bruce Street connection. I thought I heard you say, please correct me, that could arrive in this term of council.
The Bruce Road 25 and 33, for sure. The Bruce Road extension, I'd be speculating. I'm not going to say on that. But the one thing I will point out, that those two projects are primarily county projects and will be funded from the county. They're County Road 25 and County Road 23. So this is our project, and it has nothing to do with those county roads other than they line up.
I understand. Allow me this then, that once we dig up a section of road significantly in that area, to do ours and do theirs at the same time, and to contract the asphalt resurfacing at the same time, there might be some, there's some options on packaging it all together and reducing overall cost.
Thank you. Can I just ask for an explanation? It's not very often that we see the words local improvement charge on the type, and it's related to active transportation. Who would be assessed with the local improvement charge? Is it a specific area, or is it across?
Sorry. The local improvement charge would be subject to the sewer and water main installations.
Well, I think it was confusing because it says active transportation. I didn't connect that with.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the sewer is to be extended, would benefit obviously. Yeah, sewer and water. And again, one of the reasons we did bring this project forward was we had several requests from residents in that area that in the past we know there's wells that dry up there, and
I think just for clarity, it is kind of.
Yeah, I got excited when I saw active transportation.
It's in the other column, and you kind of assume that's where it is, and it really isn't. Not, right? Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really hate to see this one cut. I mean, it was literally, I think, my first year on council when Linda Virgo came and asked us for this project. They couldn't drink the water, the wells were drying up, and we talked about doing this project. I would, and I said it then, and I've said it since a few times, I'll say it again now, I would very much like to see us consider just doing the water installation in this section and foregoing the sewer. They're not asking us for sewer. They have a water problem. We can provide water up that road. I just wonder, is there a way to repackage this project that could apply more of the cost, give them the option at least of doing the project up front and taking on the road reconstruction costs and reducing and we in turn reduce the cost by getting rid of the sewer portion of the project. I would like to give them the opportunity of moving forward with this because I know they have a problem. They've had it for years. I just wonder if we can reconfigure the project a bit to give them the opportunity to pick it up as a local improvement charge, pick up the whole project as a local improvement charge, or to reconsider it anyway. I mean, that's just an idea that I have, but I certainly don't want to see it deferred very long. And I still would like to make the point that, and even if we do defer this year, then when it comes back, I think we should strongly consider offering it up as a water-only project. I understand that's not our standard approach to this, but that is the problem there, and I really think we need to address it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thanks for the thought, Deputy Mayor Luke Charbonneau, because I believe that the community has done that very temporary water line system before, correct? It's not something that we've done recently? Installed a temporary water line?
I don't know that I'd call them temporary, Neil, but we did extend water up the 10th concession prior to restructuring in the late 90s, the 10th concession from here it went out east here and then went all the way up to Johnny Chapel's there. And it was, you'll see the cut in the pavement here, and then it was dug up on this, didn't dig the pavement up, they dug it up off the side. Were you involved with it, Stuart? Yeah, I remember when we were negotiating it, because it was the same idea. There was a bunch of people with wells went dry up there in Saugeen Township. So it has happened. I don't want to go much longer than that.
I just wondered if we can, Mr. Mayor, if we can go back using the rail trail as some access back behind Walmart and not dig up a road to put a temporary water supply line in. Maybe use some easier land to work with, like the culvert sides of the rail trail, and that way save the majority of this work, as I mentioned before, for a bigger package, and still do what Lucas suggested. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if you do vote to defer it for now, we could go back and try and look at some options, and it could be treated like the McBeck Lane servicing one, which council dealt with mid-year, where we had it fully funded by the residents, and there's just a simple agreement to do it. So there wasn't a direct budget implication, so a vote now to defer doesn't mean that the door is closed.
I like that. The one other thing, I know what we have done in the past traditionally is we've polled those people in the area, and once you get an estimated cost and see what the appetite is, it doesn't mean it doesn't mean anything, because we can proceed with the project without any particular level of support. We can put it on, but I mean, it's always nice to talk to the people and see if they're supportive of it. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I'm just curious to know if you look at the total sum, it's kind of dividing up, not exactly, but almost a third tax levy, a third those residents, and a third development charges. Obviously, the development charges line is coming from a report that was prepared, so those kinds of. So if we push this out, those dollars are still sitting there in develop. Okay. Now, having said that, I appreciate what's just been said. Like the deputy mayor, I was here for that deputation. I don't agree with asking residents here to fund road work when taxpayers pay for road work all over the community, and so it's a benefit to the whole community. Plus, whatever happens in this stretch, it's a very well-traveled portion of the road. I can appreciate the local improvement charges, will be attached to residences there. I think we should keep in mind that this is one of the areas of our community where there is potential for lower income housing isn't the right way to say it, but more affordable housing. So I think we should, look at this very carefully, because, we've got a third, and, the third that's on the tax levy. Well, I would be very, it would be very difficult for me to say that, well, we'll just ask those people to pay for road improvements. That's a busy stretch of road. There's a lot of people that live further down, and, it's a project worthy of attention, and it's been deferred for a lot of years. Thank you. Just for clarity, and maybe Stuart can address, but I think the local improvement charges would be just for the water and sewer. The road improvements would be levy. Sorry, go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to calculate, and we're certainly open to looking at, like CEO said, looking at different options for council. But we need to keep in mind, though, that there's a limited amount of homes on that stretch, and the homes have a lot of frontage. So each local improvement charge is likely to be quite substantial, because you have to cross such a large frontage with that main. So a lot of costs are there, and there's also a trailer park there that does not have sewer, which has a significant amount of bases there. So that's a lot of that's in there as well. But we could certainly give the details on that and reorganize that and look at other ways to calculate it.
But for clarity purposes, the water and sewer, I think what we're trying to get at is the water and sewer is funded by the benefiting property owners. The road improvements would be funded through the tax levy.
Correct.
Okay. Yep. So, good discussion. I think we've got a couple options for staff to proceed on this, and if you're happy with that, then I can ask the question about deferring this, I guess. So the question is, all in favor of deferring the concession 6 upgrades? Opposed? That's carried. So the next item then is streetlights, defer the Port Elgin BIA streetlights. And it's about $30,000. Go ahead, Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I'll just represent Councillor Mayette. Also wanted his comments noted here, and he, like me, thinks that removing this at this time would be not particularly appreciated by all of the efforts that have come before it in terms of encouraging consideration in downtown renovation and revitalization. I think it's one of the very few areas in the budget where we're doing something that you'll be able to see downtown. And so for that reason, I would not defer this for 5 minutes. So I certainly would vote against deferring it.
Councillor Grace?
Yes, I also support going ahead with this expenditure, and I don't support the deferral. I think if we drive through our town and see the attractive decorative lighting, the difference it makes on a street, in our neighborhoods, in Main Street down Southampton, I think it's a very powerful thing, and we have committed ourselves, I think, to the idea of downtown revitalization as part of our economic development plan going forward, and I think we should take advantage of the fact that the BIA in Port Elgin is going to match this dollar for dollar and go ahead with that. Thank you.
Councillor Minaj.
Well, it's beginning to sound like it's almost redundant for me to throw my support too. But what I would like to tell you is that from my discussion with residents in the town, let alone the business people that are looking to improve it, it's tax dollars well spent in support of their project. They're working a plan. We asked for a plan, we received a plan, and this is working the plan. I think we should reward those where we've asked for the plan, we've received the plan, and they've raised money among themselves, and it's 50-cent dollars. So in keeping with that thought, though, we have an A, B, C, D, E system, and I don't know that this really slots into any one of those. This is partnership money for a P, or this is grant money for a G. Like we need some other designator that says that this money is different, and I believe that it's worth supporting. Thank you.
Hey. I'll just call the question. So the question is then, who is in favor of deferring the Port Elgin BIA streetlights? All in favor of that? All opposed then? So that stays. Traffic signals, partially funding UPS upgrades for emergency preparedness from the emergency preparedness reserves. Questions, comments to this? Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
I would say, Mr. Mayor, that given the fact that we've just added $30,000 back to the budget, and I think we're going to want to try and keep ourselves back under that 5% range. I would be, I said it last time, I'll say it again, this is one that I could see removing from the budget, from the tax levy altogether. And if that means eliminating the project, then so be it. This is a service level enhancement. It's a service level enhancement. That's what we're looking at. We operate well with these, with the current situation. We've noted in the traffic information presented by the chief a couple of weeks ago that most of our traffic incidents happen in broad daylight when the power is on, bright sunshine, and moving forward, all happy as can be. And that's when all the accidents happen. We don't have a huge issue with accidents in intersections at this point, or at least not some very elevated threshold. Anyway, I think I think the system works well as it is, and we don't need to enhance the service level. So I would put this one on the table at least for removal altogether. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I agree.
Well,
Comment?
thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's more policy. It's more the high level approach again, and it's something I need to understand. I believe there was a case last year in the budget where the Market and Geddes Street came in substantially lower, and so money was the extra money on that approved project was then brought forward in a staff report that said we could continue to do 2 blocks of Waterloo Street. So is this something then that we could star or flag and say to the department head if in fact I mean it's got its moments, right, when our chief financial officer says you thought you had this money and the vice deputy mayor has said we shouldn't be doing it. We should be holding that money back when there's a savings in case of cost overruns in other areas. But I see this one as something it's a low amount, and if in fact the department head does realize a big savings on a project, that we should star this and say let that department head have that back.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Although I agree with the idea behind Councillor Menage's comments, I don't agree with it related to this specifically. $20,000 maybe is a low amount of money, but if we have $20,000, we got crosswalks that need upgrading and a lot more useful ways, I believe, to spend $20,000 than to ensure that when a traffic light goes out that it still flashes. Most people, responsible drivers, I'll give you, not everybody fits in this category, but most people know to treat it as a 4-way stop. That's just understood. So although I agree with the notion behind that, I don't, removing this, I would say remove it. If it ever has to come back, it gets discussed again. It's not one that just sits there and rises up without us being involved in it.
Councillor Menage again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber, I understand what you're saying. I recall a comment made that when those lights, power outage, under emergency situations, we're dispatching police or we're dispatching staff to help, and that this is the purpose of these backups. So if in fact this is a true statement, then we're going to be absorbing costs one way or the other. So how many power outages are we going to have in the next 5 years, and how much is that staff value versus what this is valued? Thank you.
You want to comment to that, Stuart?
Yeah, certainly. I can recall a recent one where the power just went out at Tomlinson. We had called the police. Our electrician came over. There's call-out charges, and I think we need to remember as well that, well, from my point of view, anyways, that all our traffic signals are on Albert Street, Goddard Street, a Class 2 road. It's a connecting link with a lot of traffic, and we're not on the side streets, and these certainly do add a level of safety when the power does go out, and it helps us not to have to go out during storm events to look at the cause.
Okay. Are we ready? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that the item be removed from the budget.
Okay, I'll ask that question and we can. Okay, I think that's the way we've been doing it, but so you can vote that way. So the question is, unless you want to change that, now if you want to make a motion, let's keep going the same way we've been doing it. So you're just going to if you support it or don't, and then you'll get the answer. Sorry.
Clarify
sure.
that we're really talking about $10,000 from the levy. Right.
Let's clarify that. Well, yeah, I guess. Okay, the question then is, and so if we ask the question, you partially fund the UPS upgrades from emergency preparedness reserves.
If you ask that question, then doesn't it automatically go back to being 100% tax levy funded? Right, if you vote against
I
this?
think we would then like to entertain probably a second question after that, or possibly
Okay.
a second question after that.
Because I don't know how to support that. I don't know how to vote on
Well,
that.
okay.
That makes it very
Okay,
difficult.
I mean, I don't want to get too hung up on procedure here, and I think we're kind of where we are. You know, I guess the question should be asked, I'll phrase it differently if you'll give me leeway, is who supports taking this project right out of the 2015 budget? And if we leave it in, then we can go back and say, how are we going to fund it? How's that? Is everybody happy with that? So the question is, who's in favor of removing this completely from the 2015 budget? All in favor? Again, 1, 2, 3, opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. So then it remains. So now I guess the question is, how would you like to... Sure. Okay. Who all in favor of removing this project from the 2015 budget? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed. Okay, so it's removed. Next item. Bridge defer McEwen Design Bridge. Questions to this? Councillor Myatt?
This is one project, and I think it speaks to not only the McEwen Bridge, but all the bridge infrastructures that we have in town that I think we should be very mindful about deferring. These are infrastructures that were passed over to us from generations past, and they provide important links to the people that live in the Saugeen Township area to allow people to get back and forth between their lands, and this one is an important one, and $30,000 is, to me, money well spent to come up with a condition and path forward on this bridge.
I guess a good question for Stuart on this, and to put it in kind of context, I know the design, the last bridge inspection was last year, so the next one will be 2016. So the bridge will stay, we don't have to make any decision on it at least until we get another bridge inspection.
Correct, and as you remember, we did the separate report where we had those bridges inspected at a different level,
yep,
which identified some goals that we needed to meet, and probably when we'd have to reduce the loadings on them. So at that point, and next year we'll have another look at it again for an update on it.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Just so I'm clear, though, Stu, through Mr. Mayor, on the timing of that, then, I mean, what you've got in the budget here is engineering design for a replacement. If we come up against bridge inspection next year, even if we budget for this work in 2016, then we won't necessarily have plans in place by the time the bridge inspection is complete, right? Well, there's the potential we run up against having to close the bridge.
Correct.
Or not. I mean, I think the bridge, I'm not going to, I'll go again to you, Myatt, and then Councillor Myatt, and then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During the public consultations, one of the items that was brought forward was that instead of replacing an iron bridge with an iron bridge, that other alternatives be examined, large culverts or concrete culverts or some sort of manufactured replacement and more modern technology. So as part of this design, are the design engineers going to be instructed to come up with some different options for a bridge like that?
That was part of the RFP process, yes.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to ask Emergency Services Management what change if the bridge is if we have to change and stop up the bridge, close the bridge, what does this do for emergency management?
We haven't studied it fully, but the bridge is of a date that will worry about future loads on it anyways, be able to carry the weight of a fire truck.
Sorry, my question wasn't clear enough then. Access to properties in a timely manner, would we be using that bridge today for police, fire, and ambulance? And if we have to close it, what happens to response time and risk management for police, fire, and ambulance? Thank you.
I'd have to look at it and do some travel distances. It's not maintained in the winter, and I don't know that anybody's on that concession. Yes, there's roll numbers, but I'm not sure if there's anyone who lives on that concession. One.
Enough discussion? Any more questions? I guess I go back to this, bridge report, and I don't recall, I think, what it said in there about that one, but potentially in 2016, it'll be good again, or a lower posting. It's not at the lowest posting yet. So potentially you would go down one more step on, I think there's one more step to the minimum. Is that correct?
Correct. The one that was closer was the Cold Bridge on 1314. We're talking about the other one on 1819,
yeah.
Which is the McEwen Bridge. So yeah, chances are we won't be posting it again next year at a lower posting, and there still would be another step down, as you say.
Okay. I just raised that so it means it's not really imminent that we're going to have to make a decision on this bridge and design it. But it would be nice if there was infrastructure money available. Lots of things would be nice. So I guess I think we've had enough discussion unless anybody else wants to ask some questions on this particular item. Then the question is, all in favor of deferring the McEwen Bridge design? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. So the next item is trails, and it's to remove rail trail crossing lighting. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This whole project came about as discussions that have been led by the Director of Community Services with regard to the rail trail crossing at Highway 21, and I think that, well, this would be a good project. I think there's other things that we can look at, and we're in some ongoing discussions and doing some ongoing work with, and I know the Director of Public Works is also having some level of success, or success maybe isn't the right word to put it, but he is expending a tremendous amount of energy to try to come up with some statistics around this. So there's work ongoing on this area, and I think that it would be important to note that I'm going to support removing it, because I'm not sure that I know that lighting doesn't solve the bigger problem that we have there. It would be nice to have, but I don't think it's necessarily going to solve the big issue. So, but I think it's important to note that the work's ongoing. The town continues to work on it and is attempting to bring the MTO along with us on some of that work as best we can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions. The fundraising donation, is that something that would be still accessible in the future? The $5,000? The total cost is $15,000, and $5,000 of that would be...
The original proposal was $10,000 from the levy and $5,000 from a donation. And it doesn't identify the donation, and I guess... Oh, we were going to try.
Oh.
So we...
Okay. Okay. My other comment...
That clarifies it, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It does. But my other comment is that I do have a concern about the lack of lighting there. I mean, I was driving on that stretch in the fall, just around dusk, and somebody was riding their bike right across, didn't stop, and, I just kind of wonder what our town's liability is there if we don't have proper lighting. It's just throwing it out. I can see other priorities, but I do have a concern about it in the future and now too.
Yeah, so we have had some good discussions with the MTO on that, but to be clear, none of that highway is our jurisdiction. To do anything there, we need encroachment permits, we need any number of legal agreements with the MTO to do anything, and we still have some work to do even to get a light approved at this point. So, liability, yeah, we can certainly look into that some more, but there's some other issues to look at with the MTO.
Thank you. I understand everything that's been said, and I've been swayed from my original comment, but this is, we haven't seen the rail trail budget, and you know, I don't know how that all fits into this, but where I'm going with this is it's the 25th anniversary of the rail trail this year. And if we're not going to do this, I would like us to imagine keeping $10,000 in our budget to do something. It's the 25th anniversary of the rail trail. It's their Jubilee year. They got lots of stuff going on. Maybe they'll be in here to ask us for something. But I think, you know, it's a wonderful asset to the town. And Stuart's right. You know, there's a whole lot of issues with doing something right there at the highway. Quite frankly, I don't think the highway's ever going to be 4-lane through there, so I don't think the highway's going to get any wider. So, you know, maybe this is the time to go through the process to get a light there, because, you know, I don't think the highway's ever going to get any wider, but we certainly, I think, might consider doing something, whether if it's not for a light, keeping something in here that we can do something with the rail trail because it's their anniversary.
I think maybe, like we annually, there's again the request in the operating budget that we give to the rail trail, and I suspect if they will be planning or should be planning something, they're the, maybe you can.
Yeah, unfortunately a lot of their members are south right now, and I did have some previous conversations with them, I think back in October, November. They do have some plans for 2015 as part of their celebration, and I anticipate they will be here within the next couple of months to at least promote what their activities are. And we as staff will be working closely with them to make sure that those plans come to fruition as well.
Just for I forget what the request from the rail trail, or what we have in the operating budget, how much money it was. Do you know? Do you remember, Jane? It's probably around
8,500 comes.
It used to be.
To mind.
Yeah, it used to be around 12 or 18 at one time, and then we cut it back. And I think they had, and even at that, they had some substantial reserves. That's why we. Yeah. So that I suspect they're probably well funded for a celebration. So the request was for 7,500 this year. Kate just told me that.
Well, perhaps just for clarification, as the Director of Community Services and Recreation just said, chances are they're going to be here at some point soon to talk about the Jubilee year. If we get an ask then, you know, do we have any money that we're sticking anywhere that we can draw something from, or are we going to have to find it? Do we have a donations budget? I don't think it's there anymore, is it?
Hospital's getting all of it, but we have in the past all budget there. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarification then, if that fundraising $5,000 is actually not really there, would the effect of deferring this be in fact $15,000?
We typically wouldn't do the project if we didn't have the funding as proposed.
Thank you.
Okay. Enough discussion? So the question is the recommendation is removal of the rail trail crossing lighting. And I'll ask the question, all in favor of that? That's carried then. Opposed? So the next item then is waterfront and defer waterfront signage. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I really don't know where to start with this because if you really get into the budget documents, there's a line in there. I believe it's $1.3 or $1.4 million for waterfront, and it's indicated as being coming from debt. Over how many years, it hasn't, I don't recall us having that discussion, or even what would be included in the $1.3 or $1.4 million. It's kind of interesting, I think, that, $6,000, we're about to kick it to the curb, but yet somewhere else in the budget we have 1.3 or 1.4, I can't remember the exact number, that we haven't even discussed here as to what that's going to include. So, this is kind of a weird one to even have here, because there's a huge amount of money in there for the waterfront.
Councilor Minaj.
Okay, so in support of Vice Deputy Mayor Diane Huber, and to better inform her, the implementation strategy for the waterfront, in this particular piece of the waterfront, Port Elgin Main Beach, it has 4 phases. There's phase 1A, 1B, 2, and 3. Phase 1A is the promenade for $488,000 and change, enhanced washroom for $500,000, sand migration measures for $172,000, and miscellaneous items are a percentage of the total of some very large number of $232,000. So that's the information we have. It was part of the plan that was accepted by council when received, accepted. Okay.
Let's not fight over words, but go on.
So regardless of
I think, Neil, we're going to get to what we will discuss.
So the semantics of it is, for me, if we're going to, I will actually vote in favor of deferring the waterfront signage if we're allowed to roll it into the $1.393 million and say that if we're going to approve the 1.393, it ought to be able to fund the signage at the same time. And I think that's exactly what, I'm not going to put words into Diane's mouth, but I think that's where she was headed. Thank you.
I think we can have that bigger discussion about that capital and the waterfront under, and any other project under the capital project under number 17 when we get there. This is fine. But yeah, you can do that. The question, but.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I need to repeat myself for my own clarity, is that if we vote in favor of deferring the signage element, I'm asking for a method that we can say if we vote in favor of the 1.4 million or for the whole waterfront project, that we can include this amount there and say...
Yeah, we can do that, Neil.
Thank you.
So, any other questions? So the question then is, recommendation is to defer the waterfront signage at $6,000. All in favor? That's carried. Opposed? That's carried still. The next item is other facilities that reduce the exterior renovations at the town hall. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I might as well go first again. I'm struggling with a number of things here, and we've already had a downtown comment made, and reference was made to plans that were put in place a number of years ago. It's very interesting to me that we've had community improvement plans and streetscape plans for now Port Elgin and Southampton. The town hall has had some kind of background study attached to it too, and the waterfront is slipped in there as well. And we're now about to talk about later on 1 point whatever million for the waterfront, which there's some merit to spending some money at the waterfront. But why do we keep some of the other things that we've had reports on and had community involvement in? Why do we keep pushing them further and further out, and we let newer things that have come in after, just take over or rise above them? The town hall in Southampton is the iconic heritage building in Southampton. A couple years ago, we allocated $1.7 or $1.6 million to do some renovations to the Carnegie Library in Port Elgin. That's the iconic heritage library in this part of Saugeen Shores. Heritage buildings represent tremendous assets to the community. This building is not the Southampton Town Hall. It's not about just a little bit of exterior beautification. It's a much bigger project, and I guess, taking a little bit out and not prettying it up a little bit on the outside isn't doing anything to improve the inside of the building. And it's at some point we should start and finish something instead of just getting plans and having community consultations. Then they go on a shelf and we whittle away at them. And again, the waterfront is very deserving of attention, but right off the mark, there's 1 whatever million there. We never gave that same courtesy to the streetscape plans or something like the Southampton Town Hall. So I don't agree with this. However, at the same time, keeping a little bit in there for the town hall is a good thing, but we got a much bigger project there with the inside of the building that we can't keep pushing it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree. I'd like to know which phase of the Hampton Town Hall renovations, which phase of the plan that was approved is this $139,000, my first question. My comment would be, if this is part of a plan that's been approved, as we're talking here, we're saying we're going to approve plans, we're going to have supporting financial plans from our chief financial officer that is going to say how we're going to move through the years and complete these plans. I would like to see the town hall and Southampton plan be completed. My comment is that I too believe that the money should come. If we're going to approve 1.4 million or thereabouts for the waterfront, we should remove 139,000 from the waterfront to pay for this phase of this plan, and tell me when the rest of the phases of this plan are going to be completed. Thank you.
I don't know. You can maybe speak to the plan. We had done a condition assessment on it, and I just for clarity, there was some recommendations, and I don't think it was ever a plan that council accepted. We had an architect look at it and say, here is what you need to do to protect some things, and we spent about, well over $300,000 on the clock tower not very long ago, for somewhere around 380,000 or so. So the recommendations were, there was really no, I don't want you to get hung up and to say that there was a plan and that council said we were going to do that. That is not the case, and it's not the case in a lot of things, just like the waterfront. We accepted that, but that doesn't mean that we're going to spend that $6 million down there, Neil. So the recommendations were, here's the state of the building. There was a lot of public consultation on that here is some options if you want to look at those. And I think at the time, council, and we have been in the past, how we've been proceeding, I guess I shouldn't get so close here, but is the recommendations were, here's some things that you should do to protect the integrity of the building itself. That was the clock tower, and that's really where council has supported that. Those other ideas about $1 million plan were about a theater and a whole bunch of things that need a whole lot more discussion before you would want to spend that kind of money on the building. And I'll go to Councillor Grace next.
Mr. Mayor, so my question, I guess, probably is for Jane, and I don't know if Bart is involved in this too, but of the $139,000, how much of that would be protecting the integrity of the building? And my second question is, do you see any soon-to-be realized opportunities for perhaps some kind of community partnership that might pick up some of the slack here? Thanks.
Of that 139,000, the steps are in dire need of replacement, and we know through some costing that we've received previously, those are about $45,000 to replace those steps. Now, in saying that, it's awfully hard to give an accurate amount until you start the project as well and what's underneath there. We also know that the existing lights need to be removed. They're not grounded. They have to be removed. So what we're asking for, if we're reducing it today at $50,000, we anticipate will get us the stairs replaced and the lights taken out. And your second question, is in regards to community partnerships.
Community projects that might be funded by a community group that might
Absolutely.
take care of landscaping or something?
Absolutely. We've, as recently as this week, have continued some conversations in what that may look like. More recently for the interior, we certainly have had conversations with the 150th committee that has a desire to do some assisting with some renovations as well. Their criteria was for internal renovations. We've had conversations with our current tenants as well on what that may look like, and the possibility of shared services within that facility as to what that may look like through efficiencies. So those conversations continue, and I'm somewhat excited to say that some of them are certainly coming to fruition probably in the near future.
Go ahead.
So that you may be hopeful that some of that remaining amount might be picked up by those?
Not so much for the exterior, no. I'm not hopeful for there, but definitely for the interior.
Thank you.
Did you have another question? Go ahead.
Well, I do, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so my question is to ask you if we can ask staff to bring back phasing plans that can be accepted and approved with the accompanying financial plans for the future of all projects, so that when we declare a project like this and we have an open house session and we agree with consultants' reports that comes with an accompanying financial plan and a phase plan that says we ought to be trying to do this amount of work per year until completion.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that was one of the objectives that we hope to derive from the follow-up to our session that we frankly had on Saturday. As we indicated then, and as part of the orientation, the sum total of all of the proposed priority projects exceed the ability of the municipality to borrow funds sufficient to deliver them. So it's going to take council to provide staff some direction as to what their priorities are and the extent of investment it wants to make in each of these competing documents, priorities or projects. And so staff are very hopeful that early in this term that process can unfold to the point where we can give you a capital plan, a financing plan, an operating impact, and a debt-related impact that you can then look at as a whole and say you're willing to allocate $1 million here, $4 million there, $7 million there. And at the end of the day, what that total impact will be over the course of the term. That is something that, as I say, we hope evolves from the conversations that we began on Saturday.
I'll go back to, go ahead, John, and then
I was just going to say, Mr. Mayor, that I'd have to agree, without a real plan on where, I hate doing kind of Band-Aid fixes and then trying to do something after. It just seems to make a lot of sense to wait, to defer this and wait until we know exactly what we're going to do and then just do it, as opposed to kind of fix the steps, take down a couple lights, and then have to do something. That's my only point.
I think go ahead, Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The steps can't be left, is that correct? Because they're in such state of disrepair? Same with the lights. The lights must be fixed because of the shortage. Yeah. So of that $50,000, the rest was for landscaping?
There was a considerable amount for landscaping for the interlocking brick as a tripping hazard right now, needs to come out. The landscaping around the gardens as well. Interlocking brick would be a large expense. The steps leading up to the washrooms, the existing outdoor washrooms as well, needed to be replaced. All of that needed to be done.
So the back washrooms are included in this as well?
That's right. That's all part of the landscaping.
And are they?
Not the bathrooms,
the
the steps
steps
leading up
the
to the
steps.
bathrooms.
Now the steps are they accessible? Do they meet the standards for accessibility?
No, they're not accessible.
Nothing in that building does.
That was a rhetorical question.
So just in terms of the interlocking stone, the town has responded to an insurance claim from somebody in that general vicinity. So there's a certain degree of risk management that Jane is trying to avoid by investing.
Make the comment, Mr. Mayor, that, Yeah, I mean, we want to see investment in this building, I think, but, you know, in what is obviously for various reasons a pretty difficult budget year where we've seen a huge amount of cuts, particularly to our capital end, or money we would traditionally have used for capital funding. The fact that we are maintaining funding in here at this level to fix the steps at the town hall and to fix the lighting at the town hall, those are the two things we're going to get done at $50,000, I think is moving the development in the right direction. We're not going to, anything we do with the building in the future is going to require us to keep this front steps. You know, it's not like it's a bad investment, right? It's good, you know, I believe it's a designated, pardon me, I believe it's a designated building, so the facade is protected, and so we have to protect the facade. It's going to be there as long as that law is applicable. So I think it's not as big an investment as we would like to make. I think we can all agree to that, but it's a good investment this year to move forward a big chunk of that project. And I'd also like to see us, with the rest of that landscaping with regard to the interlocking brick, you know, the Southampton Streetscape Plan comes into play there at some point when you get into the area around the town hall. And we're going to have more discussion about that. This year we haven't finally adopted or accepted that document yet either. So it might be not a bad thing, frankly, to see it deferred just slightly and let us get that plan in place over the course of 2015, get something approved by council, and then we can develop something that we want to see move forward next year. So, I mean, you know, I understand why it's reticent to see the money go, but I think it's a good project and may work out for the best in the end. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is to our CIO. Are there any legal issues outstanding because of the interlocking brick right now that if we left it, or does it have to be fixed?
Particular issues resolved. We are doing an increased monitoring of the undulations of the brick as a result. So there's nothing critical at the moment. So when we dig up fix the lighting, we're probably going to be disturbing the brickwork anyways, and it's going to have to be redone at that same time, correct? So for clarification, what we're proposing to do at this point is remove the lighting. We cannot afford with $50,000 to replace the lighting. And when we take those light fixtures out, we will restore the ground to a flat surface that will not create a tripping hazard.
So there will be no illumination of the town hall at the front anymore?
Not funded with $50,000, that's correct. Or the back.
I think we'll be running into more issues without the lighting.
There would be some temporary interim lighting put up for safety, but there would be nothing that looks like the proper decorative light fixture there.
Mayor, how much is it going to cost us to put the lights in? And we can't put up a temporary funny light on the front of the town hall. What's that going to cost?
When we originally looked at taking the lights out, we did not anticipate on replacing all of them. It is, I'll say, abundance amount of lights in that area, so we would be reducing them significantly. Also, we're aware, and Stuart can maybe help me out with this, is that we did an analysis of the existing street lights where the lighting canopy would be. It is significant along the front as well. So if we were to replace some of those lights, we certainly would not believe it's 10. We would not need that many lights.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, could we come back with something here that, I mean, I want to see the steps fixed, but if we're going to pull the lights off the town hall, let's make sure we put something back up that looks half decent. I don't want us to do something there that's going to be odd at the corner. I mean, it's got to look. Let's get it to a place that behooves the place, and do a proper job of it. So, I mean, I don't know if I have a number here of what that looks like, but whatever the dollar figure is, let's find out what that is and either not do it or do it right, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think what we're saying is I think we proposed to do this last year and we were not successful. And we had numbers then that were not supported by council. It is absolutely necessary that the existing lights be removed for safety reasons this year. And so that's the position that Jane's in here. If the direction is to look at what it will cost to install a few more lights in addition to the $50,000, we'd be pleased to do that. But we frankly thought we'd had this conversation with council already once.
That would be my desire, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So, okay. I guess, perhaps the way to do this, it would be, again, like we did with the other one, is add that. Look at this project, and if you want to add that project, add it when we get to 17. Is that fine? So, and then, any further questions here? Running out of air. So the question really is, the proposal is to reduce the exterior renovations at the town hall from $139,000 to $50,000. On this particular question, and go ahead.
The lighting question, is it the big standing light out front that has a short in it?
Not grounded. And I think probably out of all of them, your guesstimate, maybe 5 work right now, 6?
Okay, so I'll go back to this question, and I think the way to address it is when we get to 17, if there's some appetite for doing something more, then we'll discuss that, then you can raise it. But the question now is, who is in favor of reducing the exterior renovation of the town hall from the tax levy, which was $139,000 to $50,000? All in favor? We're reducing it. So the question is, it was originally proposed that we spend $139,000. Staff are recommending that we reduce that to $50,000. And that's the question. Do you support the reduction from $139,000 to $50,000? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next item, number 14, then, is it's recommended that we remove the street furniture and the Southampton entrance signs from the downtown capital. Move it completely. Okay, there's 3 of them then. 10,000, 10,000, and so it's $30,000 total for 3 projects. Street 64, 63, 64, 65. Comments? Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Okay, I'm completely in favor of the removal of the street furniture aspect. I as much as I appreciate all of the work that's been done in that regard, I almost think we're at the point where the streets are cluttered enough. And if we, I think rather than more street furniture, I would rather that we find ways through policies and other ways to support businesses to bring their business out into the street instead of us putting something else on the street. So I'm okay with this. I would like to ask, though, and the entrance signs for Southampton, by the way, it's maybe not clear here. Part of the core stuff is it's to create a district. So these kinds of signs are just, you call them finger signs, and it would, in Southampton's case, say, downtown district or downtown heritage district or something. So it's just setting off that it's a destination or a neighborhood in itself. So I'm okay with that for right now, but within the next couple of years, when we get the district sort of coming together, those signs belong there. But I'm just curious, and maybe this isn't the place to ask it, but Stuart, I know you have. Since these are downtown items, and it's again, the street furniture can go. We got a whole lot of other good things we can do downtown with enabling store owners. But I am curious to know, and I don't see it anywhere in here. We had that wonderful little bump out blue paint experience in Southampton last summer that I got right from the beginning. And actually, in the literature, it's called tactical urbanism now, Stuart. So not a pilot, it's a tactical urbanism experience. But we put that blue paint on the asphalt. We put the little white bollards up there. Then we removed the bollards. I thought you removed them too early, but that's just my opinion. The blue paint's still there. Now, there's nothing in here about us, doing something a little more structurally, not permanent yet, but I would just, if we're doing something downtown, boy, I want to make sure that we we make sure that that project that we did last summer, that it's still obvious that those are pedestrian bulb outs to get people across. Are we planning to continue that this year? Because I don't want to see that lost, because I think it was a good experience, and people didn't get it, then they got it. Some people will never get it. But, we certainly, it was good enough for me that we should be making sure that it's obvious. So if it's a case of, if we need $3,000 to, I'm not a fan of the blue paint, but if it's blue paint again, I'm good with that instead of nothing. If we need some money to make sure that stays in downtown Southampton for another year, ahead of curbs and new sidewalks and stuff, I would want to get that in there instead of street furniture. That's my opinion.
Comments?
In retrospect, perhaps blue was the wrong color.
Oh, I don't know. I like blue.
However,
I really like blue.
Nonetheless, when we did do the staff report to council, this was a one-year trial that was not planned to be repeated, so it's certainly up to council's discretion to direct staff whatever they would like to do.
Can I speak to all three of these at once?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So I believe that the first two, the furniture and the signage, we now have an active BIA in Southampton, and I believe that they're going to raise money, and they're going to want to take on the streetscape plan, and they're going to want to have some strategic planning sessions, and they're going to want to say, we've got 50 cent dollars to do the following, and some of these projects may very well come forward, and I think that we need to give them that opportunity if they haven't done so already, and I believe that they will help us out with these projects. The last one, the police parkette project.
No, that's not it, Neil.
Oh, sorry, I have three here on my list.
Sir.
I was running from the list that's up there. Okay, so I'll talk about the police parkette in a moment. Thank you. And I hope the mayor is going to entertain a break soon, because I wouldn't want to miss any discussion.
I won't drone on too long, Neil, to try not to torture you. I just, with regard to the Port Elgin street furniture and Southampton street furniture, I agree with the Vice Deputy Mayor, but for a different reason. I think it would be vitally important to do street furniture. I think it's not a bad thing to defer them at this moment, because we don't have any idea what the street furniture looks like. If we put the money in right now, there's a good chance we don't spend it in 2015, because it's going to take us that long to wrangle over what the street furniture should look like. My view is we should talk about street furniture through the course of 2015, what we're going to buy, get an idea what that's going to look like, and then plug it in the 2016 budget. But I'd like to see it go forward. But with regard to the Southampton entrance signs, it was identified pretty clearly by a consultant who we had in not pretty recently, that this was a very high priority for downtown Southampton, which could do great benefit to downtown Southampton. And for $10,000, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to see it stay in. I think it's such a simple thing to do, and could have a huge impact to direct people to Southampton's downtown business district. And I have multiple ideas, which I'll talk about under others, to make up the $10,000. I would like to see us. I'd like to see us keep it. My 2 cents.
Councillor Mayat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarification, we're not talking about removing existing furniture, because last year we seen the arrival of those Muskoka or NRR deck chairs in Port Elgin. So that's all BIA issues, and they're going to put those things back out, and they store them, and there's no cost to the town. We're talking about additional street furniture on top of that, right?
Maybe you want to comment to that, Stuart? No. Okay, so I guess there's 3 items here, and perhaps we've had some suggestions. We'll deal with them individually, so that because there may be some options here. So the first, is there any more questions or comments to these? If not, then the first question is, we're asking, do you remove these projects from the capital budget? And the first one is street furniture for downtown Port Elgin. This includes additional chairs and or benches distributed along the downtown core for $10,000.
point of clarification. Some items on the list are marked as deferred and some are removed. There's something very permanent about remove. So in deference to the Vice Deputy Mayor's comment, maybe deferral would be a better word for this instead of remove. It means the same thing, but his point is well taken that maybe in 2016 that'll be a better time. We should talk about furniture.
We'll use the word deferral then.
Thank you.
So the question is, all in favor of deferring street furniture for downtown Port Elgin? Okay, that's carried. Next item is street furniture for downtown Southampton. All in favor of, any questions on this particular project? All in favor of deferring that project? Opposed? That's carried. The next project then is the downtown entrance signs for Southampton. Entrance signs to be designated the downtown area and shopping district at Southampton. Costs include 2 signs at estimated $5,000 each. All in favor of deferring this project? Favor? Tied. So we lose the vote there. So they stay. So they stay. The 10,000 stays.
That's very confusing, but
it was a tie vote, and the question was, you should, and that's really not a way to do it. We asked the question almost. It's fine. We all understand. Yeah, it would be tied anyway.
Yeah, I suppose.
So you get the same result. So that stays. So the next item then is downtown increased price. Gateway signage. There's $40,000 there.
Is this leaving it or putting it in? Or was it in before? It was in for 2015 already, though. Just since I'm already speaking, Mr. Mayor, I strongly support keeping this in. It's high time to spend it and put these signs up in Port Elgin.
Vice Deputy Huber.
I wish I had Councillor Shildroth's email address because I'll just channel my inner Fred Shildroth. Yes, keep this in. I am curious, though. Councillor Minaj mentioned this ABCD thing already. We never determined the ABCD thing. I would just welcome the opportunity for the next budget cycle for us to take a kick at that can, too, because we're accepting A, B, C, Ds, and Es that we didn't have much opportunity to comment on how we would rank the ABCD. So I'll just leave that now because I appreciate what you've just said about improving the priority of this one, but those rankings were not ours to begin with.
I think the question then should be, we should explain how you come about those, and if you want to change that rating, how they came about that. But I think so we need a system on that, and then that's fine. I think we can easily do that.
We have the sign architect's impression drawings. We know exactly what they're going to look like. And it's all been previously approved that's what we're going to do going forward. Yeah, so when we say yes to this, if we say it's going to be spent, they're going to appear and everybody's going to be happy with it.
I frankly don't believe we have a council motion supporting the specific gateway signs. I can recall this early in my tenure here that was the aspect of the Corbin design project that created the most consternation. And thus, we were closer with Port Elgin than we were with Southampton. And I think a couple of the communities have taken the basic concept and have provided more economical ways to deliver the sign. So I suspect that if the money's approved, we're going to be back here to talk to you about what it's going to look like and how much it's going to cost.
Mr. Mayor, I'm correct in saying, though, Larry, that the design is in it's in the Corbin document, but also it's in the sign hierarchy. Correct. And there is a design present in the design hierarchy, and the design hierarchy was adopted.
correct?
So I would argue, Mr. Mayor, that council in the end approved a design for these gateway signs. It can come back, I guess that's fine, but I wouldn't want us to get tied up in wrangling the thing over again because there was an opportunity for the public to speak, and there was an adopted design as far as I'm concerned. And I'm welcome. I think you're quite right that these can be done cheaper, and I hope that you're right about that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Vice Deputy Mayor.
$40,000 implies that we're saying that they have to be done cheaper because the signs that were talked about in that report were each $40,000 each. So this is already implying that, less.
Councilor Minaj.
I'd like a point of clarification then, Mr. Mayor. So previous council adopted and approved the signs that we're going to say we're going to spend the money on now.
You adopted the design, correct word. Adopted the design and all of that signage strategy. Oh, the question is another $40,000. We're not getting this thing down real easy. We will. Who's in favor of keeping, I guess, the $40,000 for gateway signage for Port Elgin? All in favor of that? Opposed? That's carried. Number 16. Doesn't survive. I don't think we we're closer, but it hasn't got there just yet either. So the next item is 16, which is the police parkette at $25,000. So you want to reduce that to 10. Start with the Vice Deputy Mayor Huber again.
I'm curious to know why we would fund park work from future capital projects when we have a very large park reserve.
Most of the funds in the park reserve, and I'm going based on what I've read, not my experience because I wasn't here at the time, but I guess there was a sale of property 2 or 3 years ago, and that's really what built up the park reserve. I can pick out which it was. That actual sale was close to $300,000.
That was the Centennial Park in the old Saugeen Township that we sold to the park.
The other funds have been built up over small surpluses in some parks-related projects, as well as designated funds that have come in for specific projects as well. I can certainly provide a more detailed summary of what's created that parks reserve if there are earmarked funds. I'm not certain that that actual sale of land has been earmarked for a future project specifically or not, but that is where a large sum of that money did come from.
If I recall correctly, the objective on that sale was to invest that in future park acquisition in the future, and so the goal was not to use that particular reserve for individual park refurbishing projects to try and store it away for a future bigger acquisition.
Councilor Minaj.
Mr. Mayor, I'd appreciate council would back challenge me after I presented them with some pictures and some concept diagrams on an alternative to that particular piece of property in the community. And I believe that there are opportunities for some partners, for other partnerships to actually, some of the thinking, some of the partnerships. I would like to be challenged to work with staff, BIA, downtown revitalization, any other partners we can find, and make that a park of beauty. And I think that to that end, I would like to suggest that we remove the whole amount this year, work on a design concept, and bring it back for future year. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Mayette.
I would like to take Councillor Minaj up on his challenge, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll get the question. Okay. So the question that we have before us, or what the recommendation is, we increase the priority. Sorry, we reduce the scope from 25 to 10. But I guess, okay, we'll take that suggestion first, and the suggestion is that we remove that completely from the budget, the 10,000, the entire project. Is everybody happy with that question? All in favor? That's carried. So now, yeah, let's take a break, and Kate can see where we're at with what we give us an idea of increase. So take a quick break, say, come back at 9 o'clock. Yes or no?
Have a choice on.
Can we get started again? Okay, I think we're at the point now on the capital budget where we did defer a couple of things. I think lighting on the town hall was one, and there was one other, as I recall, someone had some suggestions. And if there's any other projects that council would like to add or subtract, or so let's hear them. I'll start with you, Councillor Grace.
Perhaps we could discuss where we are.
Oh, sorry. Maybe we should discuss right now with what these 16 projects that we've disposed of so far and what we're proposing in the changes in the operating budget, where we are. Maybe you can enlighten us, Kate.
Certainly. So as a quick summary, the streetlight project shared with the BIA was added back, and that was an additional $31,000 back onto the tax levy. We removed the UPS upgrades, which reduced that by $10,000. We added back the signs for Southampton at $10,000, and we removed the police parquet at $10,000. So overall, we've gone from what was presented to you as a total increase of 4.83%. We are now sitting at 5.03%. Yes, as recommended.
Yeah. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kate, I know that's this is a minor amount, but isn't the amount for the streetlights in Port Elgin $30,500? The total was $61,000, each at $30,500. Thank you.
Just to clarify, though, the police parquet was removed, but that was $10,000 from reserve, so there was no tax levy impact from that particular one.
That's correct. So I just allocated $10,000 from that reserve to a different project that was funded from tax.
So you have reduced the tax levy by $10,000 in response to that. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So I guess I'm correct that reserves and taxes are equal.
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
So we're at 5.03.
Okay, who's happy at 5.03? Because I'm not. Not even close.
We have a discussion before we go. I mean, we've got the 900,000 and we've got the 1.4 million still there, and it still so I think our Chief Financial Officer, Kate, said to me that it doesn't apply until 2016 if we agree to it today.
That's sort of correct. So both of those projects are proposed to be funded by debenture, in which case the actual payments to repay those debentures would not start until 2016, and we would see those payments show up in the operating budget.
And further to that, because I've had a couple of discussions with Kate about that, what then happens with that amount, though, is it's in our minds as capital this year. After this year, it becomes an addition on the operating side, and it's $250,000. Yes.
Going forward.
For 20 years?
10. I've got it in at 10.
10. But it no longer in our minds is a capital charge because it comes in under a different budget.
Councillor Grace.
Yes, I would love to have a discussion about the waterfront master plan. I can't vote to approve the 1.393308 in debt. I've got some questions. I mean, for instance, the washroom upgrades is presented to us as a lump sum without being broken down into specific amounts designated. I have a question about the grass and plantings at, I think, $53,000 and change, just because I want to make sure that any grass that was approved would not be lawn grass, but would be grass that would be presented to deter geese. So, I mean, I can't approve that without knowing more specifics. Thank you.
For you, Mr. Mayor, if council wants to move to a discussion on the proposed waterfront implementation project that's in your package from December, I think I want to talk about the fact that we're kind of have a chicken and an egg situation here. Because of timing to get the planning done and presented in a public way, what we did was have it roll out to council in its current form. It's still out there for additional comment. Council hasn't provided any direction to staff as to whether they support that or not. Having said that, the recommendation of the consultant is that there be movement towards implementing Phase 1A, and staff have been under some pressure, I guess, from the community and others to move forward with implementing some part of this plan at some point in time. There's a long discussion on washrooms last year and so on, so we were kind of caught, as I say, is it a chicken and egg? So what we proposed to do was put the dollar amount that the consultant recommended for the first phase implementation in the budget for discussion. That doesn't mean that you're committing, at least the way I view it. And what I was going to suggest to you is if you want to support some allocation to move forward with some part of the project this year, you might want to allocate a dollar amount and approve it provisionally, because you have not adopted the plan. We haven't had time to talk about grasses or what the scope of the washroom project is. But rather than trying to do all of that now, you might want to get feedback on the plan that's out there, have the conversation, refine it, refine the scope of the project, because it is entirely debt financed. It could be 1.2, it could be any number up to 1.2 once you've had a chance to have that input. What we wanted to try and do was avoid having to do a mid-year budget amendment and or not have any money to start design work this year so that we could actually get construction going in early 2016. If it does not remain in the budget in any way, shape, or form, then staff will not have any intention of moving forward with implementing it this year. We'll work on our other projects. So I understand council's dilemma in terms of saying, I don't want to just approve $1.4 million and we're going to go out and spend it and you won't see it again. So staff clearly understand that. What we intended to do was have the feedback, come back to council with a report, get the details on what that potential project would ensue or include. And if the project is reduced in scope at that point, that's fine. At least we have dollars approved that we can move forward with. So I don't know if that helps or hinders council's dialogue on what they're going to discuss in a few minutes.
Yeah, and I think it's going to make it difficult because I think there's some issues around that financial commitment, and I think it's going to be difficult to try and get to a consensus on that. But we're going to have to. But Deputy Mayor Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Larry said it pretty well, but just to say it slightly differently, there's the $1.3 million that's in the budget and as borrowing or debentures is really a placeholder. If you like, it identifies the amount of money that has been identified by the consultant, but just because it's in there doesn't mean we need to borrow it, doesn't mean we need to spend it. We've had lots of conversation around here that a washroom project could come in significantly less than what has been identified by the consultant, that the whole project could come in significantly less. I think this gives us the opportunity to flush it out and move forward on some aspect of it. I don't support spending $1.3 million in 2015 any more than anybody else does, because I agree with the Vice Deputy Mayor that we can't afford we just don't want to get hit with that huge payment next year. But some aspect of this project should move forward in 2015. I think we need to plan it out a little more, need to get some more ideas, and in the meantime, I would support leaving the line item in the budget and we're going to get all this information back. We're going to have the opportunity to make the final decision. We're going to see final costs. We're going to see all these things. We're going to get to decide whether we're going to move forward or not later on in 2015. And if council isn't happy at that time or feels that it's going to be too big of a burden, then we decide not to move forward. You know, I think that we have that opportunity. This leaves us that opportunity, but also says that we can move forward with some aspect of it, which I think, in my personal view, is pretty critically important. So I'm going to support on that basis. I'm going to support leaving that number in the budget in the way it is, understanding that I'm strongly desirous not to spend the 1.3 million. I don't know. But the reason why I don't offer another number up is I don't know what number to offer. You could offer up a lower number, I suppose, and say we could do that. But before we have more details on what implementation is going to look like of some of this stuff, I don't know what other number to offer. This is the number we have. It's the number that was provided by the consultant. So I think it's a legitimate starting point and the best number to put in the budget, at least on a provisional basis. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Rich? And through you, Mr. Mayor, and that really has no effect on the tax levy anyway, right? Not today, but down the road. So we can look at that later on. I do have a quick question. In my discussions, we talked about monies that are going to reserves. Do you remember when we were talking about that, Kate? What is the dollar figure that we're putting into reserves this year?
You do have the reserve continuity there that I distributed with the budget with this package. So it shows the total amount. So there's different types of reserves. The bottom line might not necessarily be that explanatory.
What number are you going to...
Well, for example, for the future capital projects reserve, the money that goes in every year is what we're willing to allocate out again towards capital. So we try not to reduce the total equity balance of that reserve year over year.
I was under the impression that we'd increase the amount of money we're putting in reserves this
That
year
is the
over last
intention,
year. Yeah.
that we won't have less in reserves than we did at the beginning of the year.
And the increase would be, was it $100,000 or something like that? Was that the number that I remember seeing?
I'm just opening it right now. Sorry about that. So yeah, we're looking at an increase roughly around $500,000 to the total reserves balance over 2014 based on what's been budgeted.
Based on what's been budgeted. So we've increased the amount of money that we put in the reserves by $500,000?
That's correct.
What's the process to say, even reducing that by $100,000 and taking that and reducing the tax levy?
It's difficult to look at it in such an aggregate way just because there's so many different types of reserves. So there's, for instance, our gas tax reserve fund. There's certain types of projects that we can use that money for, and there's restrictions as to how long we can save that money. There's obligatory reserve funds, such as our development charges and our parkland and lieu reserve funds. We don't really have choices as to how that money gets spent or even how it gets brought in. Really, the reserves that we look at would be the future capital projects reserve, the parks reserve, and those more discretionary reserves. So there certainly is an opportunity to draw down those reserves further than we have currently.
You kind of see where I'm going, right? I mean, no one's happy with the current tax increase where it stands. Some of the more, I would say maybe not discretionary money, but there's some money that's going into reserves, and we're going to start moving dollar figures around in different places. That should be an easy kind of starting point to try and reduce the tax levy as it stands right now.
Yes, so for example, based on what's been budgeted, the future capital projects reserve is proposed to start at 2.5 and end at 2.7. You may wish to draw more from the future capital projects reserve in 2015, which would leave you with less in the reserve, but you're right, you would have more funds to offset the tax levy.
Did you have a question, Dave? Councilor Maya?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the beginning, I believe, Kate, you said that all of the capital projects that we have before us exceed our amount that we can borrow. Is that correct? That I heard?
Not in this current budget. I know I talked about it very briefly at the orientation session, and I will revisit the debt long-term debt presentation that previous council has seen, looking at all of the big capital projects that are on the horizon that have been identified in the past. So both streetscape plans, a couple library renovations, the police station, putting all of those things together, if you were to try to tackle all of them, yes, you would exceed your annual repayment limit, and that's even probably far more than what council's appetite would be to accept on the tax rate.
And no way would I suggest that we would even approach our limit of repayment, but it would be nice to know what that number is.
We can get that number for you, and it's calculated every year. We can get that on the next agenda for sure.
And maybe even what percentage of that limit we're using on an annual basis.
Yep.
Yeah, that's actually included on the agenda coming on Monday.
Okay, we can have all that. Go ahead, Diane. Then we'll get to you.
With regard to the waterfront, I appreciate what Larry said. However, I think we should wait and have a mid-year conversation about this. By saying something right now and saying yes to 1.3 million or whatever, and with the corresponding comment that it's debt, we are saying that we're okay with taxpayers funding improvements at the waterfront. I don't think we have an agreement from the community yet that the waterfront master plan, phase 1, phase 2, phase whatever, is funded from the levy. And so we don't yet have any breakdown there. We haven't tried to link on any partners. We haven't done whatever. I think it's very premature. So I would wait. And I appreciate, though, that we got to do something at the waterfront. If we're going to put any money in there, let's put more money into operations so that we can do cleaning up and start to repair some of the improvements or start to repair some of the areas of the beach that need it. That's where we need to do something immediately at the waterfront, just as a comment. But I don't agree with leaving the waterfront. I agree we need to talk about it, and we need to really look at that plan and come up with our own customization of the phasing, which is something that we feel we can afford. But to do it right now and just have it sit there, even though we'll discuss it later, we're giving out a message that this isn't a dollar figure that we seem to be okay with, and it's also debt. My other comment is, as a possible reduction, let's buy one less half-ton pickup truck. I believe that there's 4 or 5 of them on the list this year. Each of them are $30,000. We have, I realize we have a fleet management program, but we have a lot of vehicles and a lot of newer vehicles. Perhaps we can go a year with one less truck being bought new. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'd like to start with the last first and echo the sentiment. We talked about it. We've noted it. We've been told about it by the citizens and the challenges to the department heads to find a way to do the same with one less, and I will support that as well. What I'd like to talk about is back to the waterfront and setting ourselves up for failure and setting the citizens up for failure. We're doing it to ourselves repeatedly. We're asking for tremendous community involvement. We spent 2.5 years on a committee bringing together a waterfront master plan. We then ask a consultant to give us some facts, figures, numbers, and some artistic design concepts. We get it, and the first thing we do is we put the brakes on and we say, well, we can't possibly afford any of that. So I would like to at least entertain the notion that the gas tax money for the Dollside Road, I believe it's $250,000, be reallocated to Phase 1A enhanced washrooms, and I'd like to see that number punched up higher because I don't believe the $500,000 is off base, to be honest. I'd also like to ask the Chief Financial Officer if she can repeat to me, to all of us, what she said to me, and that is that borrowing, interest rates on borrowing at this time, in the world at this time, is at some really good level that encourages borrowing because the interest rate is low, that there's opportunities for exploring a more diversified package of receiving interest on some of our reserve accounts, and if we add those kinds of numbers together, maybe we can start allocating some of that as traction towards some of these projects. Thank you.
Okay. I'll comment a couple of things. I know you've raised it a number of times about how we would invest our reserve funds, and to be quite clear, the Municipal Act is very specific about the type of instruments we can invest in. So we need to follow the law. There is packages out there, and I'm sure that the Treasurer's aware of them. LAS has, I think, an Invest One or something. We can look at that. But it's not like we go out and invest, hire somebody. They're very specific and very regulated about the instruments you can buy. So that's one. I guess I think we're kind of struggling here about how we're going to get consensus, and I know everybody wants a chance to say, and where we're going to get there. I'm not too sure about this waterfront issue. And I will comment. I can guarantee you that I will never support a $500,000 washroom on the beach. I think there's some improvements that we can do, but to think that we need to spend $500,000 on one washroom when there is so many other needs in the community, I could not support that. I think we can come up with a much better plan than that, and I think that's part of the idea when you get consultants, that you raise one of the big things about all of us here, and I think, is trying to raise and manage expectations, because the reality is we will get up, we know we will get up against our debt limit at some point, and then you have no choice. For any projects that you want, you go directly to the levy, and that's very, very painful, very painful. And you quickly lose control of your entire budget, and you don't get to make choices then. So I think we need to make those hard choices and put some really thought into these, because you're correct. In the last few years, in the last month, we've had multi-million-dollar projects proposed to this community, all in isolation, and how do we fund them? And to be honest, we cannot fund them all. We just simply can't. So we need to come to a compromise. How we get there, I guess I'm struggling, particularly on this. I mean, I don't mind your idea of leaving it in simply because it's in there and as a placeholder, and we'll have further discussions and we'll get to something on it. And that's going to be debt financing, though. So that, again, takes up some of that room in that debt financing. I don't support taking the gas tax money for it, because simply, I mean, it's just moving it from this envelope to the other. There's a need in roads, so you can take it over there, but that need doesn't go away. And I think as we go through this year, you'll find out there is some huge needs in the existing capital projects that we have, that we're not funding those properly. We're underfunding significantly, that you should, to ensure that they are preserved in the long term. So I think we need to be careful about a whole bunch of new capital projects when we're not even looking after the ones that we have now adequately, in my mind. So that's my little rant. So my question is, how, I have no trouble leaving that in, but again, that sets an expectations, and I don't want to set that expectation that they think that we're going to approve that $1.3 million in the very near future. Some portion of it, I have no doubt that we need to move on the waterfront. And I think we need to go to staff again. But we're spending a lot of time on that one particular issue, and it's not going to make any difference to the mill rate this year. We've got to get to that. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I mean, start by saying I strongly believe that we need to invest in the waterfront. I take it is for speaking personally, and my number one priority for which I will sacrifice other priorities. I've said it before. We've invested very little in that particular extremely important asset over the last decade, compared to how we've invested in our other assets, and we're underinvesting in all our assets. You're exactly right, and that's a big problem. But this is such a critical asset to the economic success of the community. It's one we have to invest in, and I'm prepared to borrow some money to do it. All that said, if council is more comfortable waiting until we've got the final version of the consultant's report and that we are in a position to adopt that version of the consultant's report, and then we want to pick a project out of it and come back with a budget amendment to do the borrowing. I will still support the borrowing to do the project, because I think we need to get the project underway, and I hope we'll move that forward as soon as possible. And we're not making any decisions on this until we have the final consultant's report and we've adopted it and we've moved further down the line anyway. So if it's going to get council over this hurdle of this, I would say remove it from the budget, and we'll get the consultant's report. We'll discuss at that point what our priorities are, and I will be advocating a project out of there, and I will be supporting borrowing against our debt limit to do it, and I'll be proposing a budget amendment to get that in the 2015 budget. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, whether you leave it in now or do it then. But I'm quite content to acquiesce to that tonight if that makes council happier.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My other hurdle is the $900,000 pool upgrade. And I guess my question is, when do we discuss that?
Right after this.
Okay.
We're not going to lose it. Sorry. So, yeah, I have no trouble with leaving it in. But and I just wanted to have that. I think everybody should have their opportunity to speak on it, and I did. And if anybody else wants to speak, I have no trouble leaving it in, understanding that that this is going to take some more serious consideration and approval before we proceed with individual projects there and dollar amounts. Because, and I don't disagree with anything here. I think we need to do something on the waterfront for sure. But the reality is I don't think we can afford it.
Sorry. Can I ask you to separate? I think that there's some support to reallocate the gas tax money to the waterfront washroom.
Let's deal with this right now, and then we can deal with that. But
if we had that vote first, it would clear the air on whether or not this washroom has any chance.
I think we should. Okay, first of all, we should understand what that does to the rest of our budget. If we take that out of there, Neil, then there's a $360,000 hole somewhere else. That's the simple factor. So what you're doing then is saying, okay, we've got to go back and cut that amount, a whole bunch of road projects to meet that.
That's not the case.
Absolutely, it is.
I believe that gas tax money is earmarked for resurfacing the Doll Side Road. $250,000.
There's two projects. Maybe Stuart will clarify. So.
That's what it's listed in my budget.
Okay, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, it is just another hole somewhere else.
That's not true. We don't do the Doll Side Road resurfacing for $250,000.
Okay.
We just don't do it. We allocate those funds to the beach washroom.
Okay. I think John had a question. Waterloo Street is the other project.
I did, and in the end, I thought, I think we're all talking about the same thing. I mean, I think everyone knows that we need to do something about the waterfront. Nobody wants to spend all that kind of money, and I'm just trying to understand what the difference is, whether we leave it or don't, because you guys both seem in agreement that it doesn't make any difference.
They're going to debt finance. That's the proposal.
I would appreciate the opportunity to have it not be part of this budget, but that we decide in the very near future to have it be a council agenda item, that we have the opportunity for all of us to take the time to really look at the waterfront master plan, the consultants' projects, and we have a very detailed discussion at council. And at that point, we then come up with a suggestion as to the amount, because I think it's just premature to have an amount attached to it. And I think if we isolate it out, have the discussion, it'll get attention in the public, we'll get the feedback that we need to have a meaningful moving forward, and with the support of the community.
Sure. Yeah. And maybe I think we're. Yeah. So. Well, I think we're on the waterfront. Yeah, I think the idea is whether we should leave the money in the budget project. And it doesn't mean we're not going to do anything. It just means that we're not approving that 1.3. We'll be funding some portion of that waterfront improvement this year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a clarification on that. What you said earlier was whether we leave it in or out has no effect on the mill rate.
This year, yep. It will, if we debt finance,
In future years.
It will be
Certainly.
commitments for many future years.
Right.
And I think Councillor Grace had a question.
Mr. Mayor, actually, my question was for Stuart on the gas tax thing. Just a clarification. If my understanding that in terms of asset management plans, that we need to show the provincial government that we are keeping our roads and doing what we can to keep our infrastructure, maintained as well as we can in order to possibly qualify for other grants and things like that. Is that true?
The asset management plan, I don't think it's so much proof that we're doing what we can. It's more of a plan how we can maintain our assets to the level of service that council so desires.
I know, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate it, thank you, that if we just are going to say, leave it in as a placekeeper, does that not tie our hands for doing any real work or trying to do any real work with tax dollars this year? And so that's part A, and part B, I will repeat myself. I would like to see the gas tax. It's a permitted use to work beach washroom with the $250,000, which I think is light. If we did nothing else, we should at least use that money to begin the project.
Go ahead.
Suggestion, Mr. Mayor, we deal with this. We deal with the waterfront thing. If the money's in or out. If you want to allocate the gas tax stuff, you deal with project by project. Waterloo Street and Dallside Road, you propose that those projects be canceled, the gas tax money be reallocated, and we do that motion by motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, that's the way to do it, because I think, and again, I think, so that the question we should ask ourselves first is the 1.3 million in the budget provisionally for 2015. It'll be in, yeah. Well, it's in, yeah. I'm not, we're spinning wheels here, right? We're nitpicking, right? We're nitpicking here. So, all in favor of leaving that $1.3 million in the budget this year? Opposed? It's needed, right? Okay, now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to spend money on the waterfront. That means that there's other options available. Got it. Yeah. Yeah, I know we're playing with words. We'll get there.
So there's no money for additional design, consultants, or third-party analysis. It's in miscellaneous. So we have the waterfront report, so we may not be able to fund additional technical expertise if you want refinements and you want additional technical information. Because there's now $0 for this project.
Can I make a comment?
Go ahead.
I'm good with that because I don't think this council has had a chance to really talk about the waterfront. So I think it will be a good discussion, and we'll get to it sooner rather than later, and we'll come back to it. And I think what we decide will be important, it'll get started quickly. So that will come into it, but I think it's premature for us to do that right now.
So as staff noted last year, I think there's some pressure on council to move forward. So I'm just indicating that there's no dollars to help us move forward at this point.
Councilor Maz.
Excuse me. Mr. Mayor, I believe that we need to have a further discussion as a council at a later date where all the capital projects are listed in front of us and we can prioritize what we believe needs to be done. As you said, everybody's stated tonight that we're putting some off, bringing new ones on. We never really finish anything. And we've got another capital project that's going to be coming up very shortly in the pool project. I think we need to look at everything as a whole rather than, let us prioritize it, what we think and how we think we can fund them. As you said, there's no money. We have to find ways to do that, so why keep bringing things in?
I want to go back on this waterfront now. So we've taken the 1.3 million out, and so that means, in my mind, I guess, that doesn't mean that we won't proceed with any of those projects, Larry. It means that we want more information, and that what we were going to do was originally planned was debt finance those things. Right.
All it means is that in order to get the technical expertise that Larry is talking about to refine it, to actually get a design for a washroom or whatever, we'll have to allocate that money at the time and do a budget amendment to get the money flowing to get a design. So there's no money left to do anything more than what we've already done, but we'll have to apply that money. We'll have to do it at the time, that's all.
Okay, so are we happy with all that, everybody? No, and everybody's that's what budgets are about. When we've got everybody ticked off. So the next item, I guess, we'll do the pool, and then we'll do that. Neil wants to ask the question about the gas tax funding. So, and I think the way to do that is we will. I don't know. The way to do it would be to go back and say we're going to not approve the two projects that we have in the budget, which would be Waterloo Street and
there's two allocations, but I think Councilor Minaj is speaking about the 250, which is specifically to the Dallside Road. There's another 100 allocated to Waterloo Street as well from the gas tax.
How much is the Waterloo Street project total?
Which 100,000 of it is grants from the gas tax.
So I mean, Councilor Rich.
Well, whether or not we're getting gas tax money for that, I think those projects should be looked at in their own merit, should they not? Mm-hmm. I mean, as opposed to saying, okay, well, because these ones are going to be partially funded by the gas tax, then we should get rid of those. Like we're looking at projects, we should be looking at them as to whether or not they're necessary to go forward in this budget cycle. And if that's the case, then like I think we have an obligation, especially with roads, to look after the community. So I don't know. I'm concerned about saying that we're going to use the gas tax money specifically, by reducing an item because it's related to the gas tax as opposed to it on its own merit.
And I guess, and then we're kind of here again hung up because the options are if we take it, if we allocate that gas tax money to some other project than it is now, that means that those projects either won't be completed, or they're going to need to be scaled back, or they're going to need to be funded in another way, or canceled, canceled or scaled back. As Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I'm not concerned enough to play with how we allocate gas tax funding this year. However, in the future, I think it's been very easy always to assume that hard services are funded, that they have access to this pool of money, and that pool of money, and there's been very limited pools of money available for the quote-unquote softer services. The stuff, a lot of it's in community services and recreation. I think it would be very wise for us to, now that some funding pools of money have opened up in terms of where they can be allocated, I think the next time we have a kick at this can, we should not just assume traditional directions for where this funding goes, that we've got a number of areas that traditionally haven't had access to that kind of funding to help them out, and maybe we should, the next cycle, take advantage of those redirections and choose to use the money that way, because it's time that we did that, because again, there's a number of areas that have never had access to additional sources of funding like gas tax funding.
Do you want to speak to that at all, Stuart, just to clarify this?
And historically, we've used the gas tax funding biannually to fund rural upgrades. So this year was the Dalside Road. It's also worth noting that last year and the year before, the roads took quite a big hit with the Connecting Link funding loss, which is to the tune of $16 to $20 million in funding. We've already identified through the asset management plan, we have a set of assets. We know that what that value is, that they depreciate, and that we have a funding gap there quite large that we've already, with the gas tax there and the loss of the Connecting Link, we're still at a net loss on the funding. So we've already moved down in that respect. So,
okay, I'm going to ask for a motion, Neil. What your intent is here, because I'm not going to frame it.
Okay, so here's my thought, and it works with Vice Deputy Mayor Huber's thought, is that we have premium roads in our community. We've done very well, and I think that that's something we should be patting our staff on the back for, and previous councils. I would like to think that we should take a change of direction and start looking at a less than adequate beach front in our community that drives a lot of processes in our community. And it's time to reallocate funding, and I would like to see, if not all the gas tax money that we're allowed to have over the next 4 years of this term of council, most of it go towards phasing plans, towards beach master plan work. If that's what you're looking for from me, I would like to see the $250,000 from the Dalside Road be reallocated to the waterfront master plan, Port Elgin Phase 1A.
Okay, that's the question. Okay, there's the question then, so that essentially then we'll either cancel the Dalside Road project, or we will need to come up with money somewhere else. So the question is, this is what will be the result. I guess I'll ask the question on Neil's motion is, take the $250,000 from the Dalside Road and put it into the beach waterfront. All in favor of that? Opposed? That's defeated. Okay. So, any other things that, now I guess if we're done with that, we'll move to the pool at the $900,000 that Cheryl's been waiting for.
I think staff have gone to great lengths to explain the process for fleet replacement. And what you're doing at the moment is allocating a lump sum into what is a 20-year plan for the overall fleet of the organization. And I hope that we were able to demonstrate to you through the work that Phil did last year last meeting, that if we maintain the funding at the current level, we are going to be able to sustain the fleet operation going forward. I think the policy decision that council wants to ask staff to look at is whether we should review the fleet replacement schedule to see if we could stretch any pieces of equipment out. So not buying one truck isn't going to necessarily, unless you want to go there, reduce the contributions to the fleet reserve, which are, I think, $500 and some odd thousand. And at the moment, it will be in the hole when we buy the Quint for $900,000 this year. So we're already operating in a deficit for the short term. So I'm not sure that a conversation of $130,000 pickup truck is going to factor into the overall scheme. It's perfectly within council's realm, as I say, with the system that we have going now, to suggest to staff that they look at the cost benefit of delaying fleet replacement over the longer term to see whether we can bring the contributions down, if that's council's desire. That would be offset by increased maintenance costs, reduced trade-in values, and so on. So we have to do the economics over the broader picture.
And I think that, it's nice to pick that at that level, but I think really we need to have some real faith in our staff on this, because when you pick one little project out like that, you're doing it without knowing what the consequences are for a whole range of things in that whole fleet and the services that fleet provides. So I think the way to proceed is, again, what Larry suggested. If we're not happy with that fleet reserve and the replacement, let's deal with that whole issue. But I don't think it's wise to start micromanaging it to the level that's saying you should have this spec and not that truck and not this truck. So my feeling, anyway. And I think Councillor Minaj had a question, then we'll go to you, Diane.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I heard the comment was, I think from Larry, was that the residents expected the level of service requiring the number of pickup trucks that we currently use. The people I speak to on the street are saying they don't support that level of service, and I'm not trying to micromanage either. The police managed to do with one less officer. The fire chief has managed to do with one less vehicle, and we're not getting the same feedback from those people who run pickup trucks that they can do with anything less. I'm in favor of putting the motion on the floor to delete one pickup truck at $30,000 and then ask staff to figure out how they're going to do it and come back to us. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll just make the comment that, it goes to what Councillor Rich said about reserve transfers. I think we should save this discussion to the end. An overall cut to the fleet reserve transfer is pretty draconian, given the situation there, but it's certainly something we keep in our back pocket as we come to the end of this and decide where we want to end up. But in the end, I think this discussion, if we're going to talk about, I have a number of other items I want to talk about at some point for changes, but I think we can. But transfers to reserve is a juicy plum to hit for bringing down the tax levy, and I suspect that's where we're going to end up talking. So I just think that we don't have to. There's no reason to detail it out like that. Start talking about, at the end of this discussion, we'll start talking about the reserve transfers. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. So the question Neil wants to say, he wants to pick one, any particular, which one of them, Neil? One pickup truck, one half-ton pickup truck? In which department?
That's micromanaging. I would like staff to come back and say they can do with one truck less and that we're going to remove $30,000 from the budget. Thank you.
Okay, that's the question.
The fleet purchase will be funded from a reserve, and the transfer to the reserve is $585. So removing a truck is just going to increase the reserve balance. You haven't addressed the question that it's being funded through a transfer to reserve.
Yep. So we're going to ask that question. We're going to take one pickup truck, and staff are going to decide which department it will be from out of the budget. All in favor of that? Opposed? Okay. So now I think we can move on to the pool. No? We wanted to talk, sorry, Councillor Grace would like to talk about the pool.
Yes. So the budget proposes taking on a debt of $900,000 for required pool upgrades. So I think, Jane, at an earlier meeting, I asked you about, and I just want to confirm that if we approve these two units, we couldn't recoup anything from their reuse or resale in the event of a renovation or a new pool.
In all likelihood, we couldn't recoup from repurposing them in one of our existing facilities as our recommendation. Plus, as far as reselling it, that's not something we've investigated to this point, but we certainly could.
Okay. So my other question then is, if we do not approve this, what would be the scenario? What would we be faced with immediately in 6 months?
Well, for the past couple of years, I've indicated to council that the Dryatron is running on a shoestring. And our CVO was recently at the pool and can certainly confirm the condition of the Dryatron. We continue to massage it along. We've this year spent more money on repairs than we have done previous years. We have a contractor that knows the system. that has difficulties continuing to find parts for it, but that's where we are right now. And as I said before, I can't look at my crystal ball and tell you when it will stop, but it could stop tomorrow for all I know.
You know how much we've spent on repairs this year, for instance?
This year we're probably about 20,000.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Kate, as a point of clarification, $900,000 funded through debt. I'm assuming that that's a 10-year period too. What is the amount for the next 9 years? Or the next 10 years, I guess it would be.
At current interest rates, that would be approximately $100,000 a year to repay.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think under the present circumstances, it would be very difficult to justify spending the $900,000 at the moment. I think the intention of what we have done and what Council's approved at this point is to move rapidly to some sort of decision on what our next steps on this whole thing are going to be. Once we have a better concept of that, then it may be that the best thing to do is to spend $900,000 and replace the Dryatron. I think the best thing we can do is it's running a risk, but the best thing we can do is leave it for 5 months or 6 months till August. Hopefully we decide what direction we're heading, and then we can say to the public, here is the right way to invest, and that may include $900,000, replace the Dryatron at the Centennial Pool so it can last X amount of time till we can do something else or whatever. But it's very difficult under the present circumstance, and this is entirely as a result of Council's inability to decide, for which I take my fair share of responsibility, that we're just not where we need to be in order to allocate this $900,000. So that's what I'd like to see us do. So my suggestion, Mr. Mayor, would be to remove the $900,000 and reassess after we've made some more decisions later this year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't disagree with you. Councilman Minot.
Yeah, I'm not having a whole lot of problem disagreeing with it, but I would like the backup plan. I'd like to know how we deal with staff. If the pool has to close next week and it's down and gone, what are layoff procedures? What are buyout procedures for staff? I'd like the comprehensive plan so that we don't sit here spinning and saying, oh, we didn't know that was going to happen, because we need the plan that goes with it, how you shut the place down and how you put it out of service.
I think you're assuming that we're going to shut the place down, and there'd be a whole range of questions if that happens. And I think there's many options available. But I don't think we need to have that discussion right now. But I think, the question we're going to deal with is the $900,000.
I'll second the Deputy Mayor's motion.
Okay, any further questions or discussion on this $900,000? Understanding, I think you encapsulated it well. If we're faced with that decision, then we'll be back at this table making some decisions. Okay? All in favor of removing that $900,000? That's out. So, what's next? Yep.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to speak to the procedural bylaw that you do have a curfew of 10 o'clock for your committee of whole. And the purpose of that is, in regular session, you would then start your council by 10 o'clock, and the curfew for council would be then 11 o'clock. The bylaw does say that you need an approval of council or approval of this committee of whole to extend past 10 o'clock.
Okay. Vice Deputy Huber.
I will move that.
Second that.
So the motion is that we extend the hours of committee of the whole past 10 o'clock if so required. We still have 3 minutes, All in favor? So, move on, Kate. Unless there's anything else under capital. You have? Okay.
I raised this at our last meeting, but didn't defer it to capital because it made more sense here, and that is the $40,000 being spent in the tourist camp for an improvement to a building at the tourist camp, which is nominally drawn from reserve, but it's actually it's in and out. It's a reserve transfer from the revenue at the tourist camp. So if you were to eliminate the project, you could allocate the $40,000 back to the tax levy because it would be additional profit at the tourist camp. So my suggestion, Mr. Mayor, would be to remove that project. I appreciate that the project has good merits, and I don't dispute that. I only say that it is, I think, a nice to have rather than an absolutely necessary project in the year 2015 and in a year where we're going to be looking for some reductions. I think it's a capital project that we could defer.
Grace?
Mr. Mayor, could I just ask the Deputy Mayor to give us a page number so we could take a look at that?
Sorry, Councilor Grace, I don't have a page number. I have it written in my book, but we can certainly find it. Somebody will find it for me.
I'll ask a supporting question. You're probably not going to like this one either, Mr. Mayor. If we continue to cut projects from the community services budget areas, will this affect the number of FTEs required to work in that department?
No. The answer is no. Your answer or staff answer through you? We got it from staff on both sides, and I think there was a suggestion in the operating budget that we increase staff, clean the washers more frequently. So your suggestion is to remove it from the capital?
Yeah, it would be a two-step process. We'd remove it from the capital budget and then eliminate the transfer to reserve from the operating budget, thereby increasing the revenue that could be applied to the tax levy from the operating budget.
40,000. Okay. Go ahead, Councilman Menard.
So, not being well-versed in all the matters of finance, can I ask our Chief Financial Officer, Kate, is this a wise decision to take an area where we receive $500,000 in revenue per year and not put money back into it?
I don't think that's a fair question, Kate. You either support the project or you don't, Neil. Sure, go ahead.
One of the strategies or the goals in putting that money into the reserve and in 2015 subsequently drawing it out, but perhaps not in future years, would be to stabilize that contribution to capital from the tourist camp over time, so that next year, if you were to have some extra money or you weren't to fully spend that renovation funds, it would stay in the reserve. And in 2016, where the 5-year plan is proposing a $95,000 investment, perhaps you have some funds in that tourist camp reserve and you don't look at a $95,000 increase in 2016. So the hope would be to keep that contribution constant to capital every year. Some years it would be more, some years it would be less, but you'd be looking at a more stable contribution over time rather than it fluctuating with what your actual capital expenditures are each year.
I agree to a certain extent with what the Deputy Mayor said. I realize that we haven't had the benefit of a tour of the facility. I think it was 2 years ago we were down there when some work was first started. And basically what this is doing is sort of creating a lounge clubhouse kind of atmosphere for the residents of the Port Elgin Trailer Camp. And, there's some merit to a bit of a community center kind of place there, maybe not to the tune of $40,000, but that basically is what this is all about. And they have already done some renovations to the building there to improve the space, and it's a well-used space. And, some of the things in here, it's about an overhang to provide a covered area for Wi-Fi. They are nice to have, perhaps, as a, because it really does have some merit to the residents there, and it is a business, and, it is a service that, or something that, an amenity that makes sense, and that kind of facility. Maybe $40,000 is maybe a bit too much, but perhaps we should enable some money to stay there so that perhaps a little bit of a continuation of the plan that was already unfolded to improve that space can be, again, approached this year.
Oh, any other questions? I guess the question, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Rich.
I think in light of the fact that we don't know exactly how we're going to, at least I don't, I think we've talked about different ways in which operating those camps. Like, I would like to entertain as part of the idea of privatizing the operations of the tourist. We go forward with an idea like that and have a long-term lease with the operator, would be able to invest in that.
Okay. We can have that discussion, but, okay, yeah, that's fine. So any other questions on this, on Luke's proposal that we remove the $40,000 capital project and the corresponding $40,000 transfer to reserves from the levy? All in favor of that? Opposed? Another tie. What's it for? Did you? Some people don't put their hands up.
We're missing a
It's always got to be 8, right? So it was 5-3. So count again. All in favor of removing that? That's it. Okay. Opposed? Okay. Oh, any other suggestions? John's got a suggestion?
Sure. What are we looking at? Page 146, 180. Diener Trail to Trillium Drive expansion, $22,500. I'd be in favor of not going forward with that project, taking the money from reserves and putting it against the tax levy. Can't do that.
I would caution against just putting a one-time influx from a reserve into the tax levy, because next year you'll have to recover from that twofold. So you won't have that contribution to put, so already you'll have to recover from that. You'll have an automatic increase as well as any.
So we're taking $22,000 out of the reserve and fund that project. If we eliminate that project, then that's money that doesn't come out of the reserves, and instead
we could fund a different project, but I wouldn't recommend just doing a transfer to the tax levy.
Find a place where there's a tax levy.
I understand what you're saying, yeah. Okay. We could fund a different tax-funded project with that money.
Councilman Mathis.
A simple question with that is the between Trillium Drive and Diener. Public land, is that an easement? Would it be nice?
Public land, and we recognize it as what we tend to call Goat's Path, so it's an actively used area already. By turning it into a trail system, providing it certainly a more safer route for people to use. They're using it already now. We definitely know that there's a Goat's Path.
Yeah. So I just want to be clear what the suggestion is again, is to take the project out altogether of capital?
Well, my overall goal is to try and reduce the tax levy at some point. So the idea is to move that project out and then hopefully have that work in some other way.
So take the $22,500 that we're transferring from future capital reserves and use it on some other project?
It's going to reduce the tax levy, yeah. Isn't that what Kate suggested?
First phase of actually a phase project, and I'm sorry I didn't put in the distance, and it's been some time to put those numbers together, so I can get that for you.
So is everybody clear on what we're doing here? I'm really not clear again.
It would make sense. You could eliminate the project and just just say we'll apply. We'll take the C8 patrol rifles at $20,000 and fund it from the future capital reserve. So you eliminate the project, this project, and in the same motion you say, and at the same time we'll fund another project like the patrol rifles is $20,000. So it's basically the same amount, and you fund it from the future capital reserve.
Still not clear.
Well, now that you've said that, it doesn't sound very good.
I
was just picking out a project, but we could certainly pick another one, and probably that would be wise.
If I may just suggest, in order to use the entire balance, you may want to use that funds to offset the cost of the step repair at the Southampton Town Hall.
Existing costs, so it'll help the levy. Happy with that then, Josh? That suggestion? Okay. Councilor Minaj.
Mr. Mayor, these trails and these trail extensions, are they part of our asset management plan?
Not currently, no.
Are they intended to be part of our asset management plan? So is this any different than micromanaging pickup trucks at $30,000?
There you go. Sure.
In the end, the start of this conversation was how we're going to reduce the tax levy.
Yes.
And we talked about reducing payments to reserves, which wasn't the way to go. So I'm looking at individual projects. Is there individual projects that I don't think are all that necessary in a tough budget year? I'm looking at the trail from Beaner to Trillium. Is that really necessary right now? If we can take that 22,000, look at irrigation at Cameron Park, is that 100% necessary now, especially if we don't have a master plan for recreation, and then start looking at things like Hollowell Park, wait until you get all this master plan in place, and then go forward with these projects somewhere down the road. But that's going to save 1% over the long haul. We pull all those projects out and put them against something with the tax levy. That's all I was suggesting. I was just trying to figure it out, because all that stuff's coming out of reserves. And then we're putting money into reserves on the other side. So if there's a way in which we can offset it, I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe it is micromanaging. That's not my intent. My intent is to try and give the citizens of this community something palatable that they can see at the end of the day.
Okay, so the question, I guess, and then is, let's get to the question. Take the 2,000, take this project out and the 22,500. No, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. I just want to make sure everybody's clear what the question is, John. And no, it's never. Oh, it gets better. Don't worry, it'll get better. So, all in favor of John's suggestion? Opposed? That's carried. Yep. Let's have an update.
So we just made a couple changes. We've reduced the transfer to reserves from the tourist camp and the corresponding capital expense, and we've reallocated that reserve funding to a tax-funded project. So currently our increase is sitting at 4.29%.
Okay. So, any other capital projects? Suggestions? Or Deputy Mayor?
The other.
Go ahead. He's got some suggestions. I know he does.
The only other, I have one more in operating, but the only other capital one I have is the chamber office door at $10,000, which is off the tax levy. I mean, we spent considerable amount of money in the chamber. The building looks beautiful, and we can get by with the facility as it is. It's been that way forever. So I think, again, it's a nice-to-have item in 2015, but not necessarily an item that we need to put in, so I would suggest removing it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, before we do that, I recall hearing something about maintenance and repairs because that door is constantly being blown open by the wind. How often does that happen? Is it, are those figures adding up so that, I heard that there was a safety concern there. Can anyone speak to that before we remove it?
Well, that door has been on forever. You are correct. And Joanne is in the gallery tonight, but certainly there's been issues where that door has come right off the hinges on blustery days, and we have those more than not just a safety concern, but an impact to the infrastructure too every time the door comes off. Make do if that's the wish of council, but it wouldn't have been on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's also a description of this as being accessible entrance. Does it have some relationship to accessibility in a legal sense, too?
Right now, it's not accessible. That's the other reason why we were putting it on. It's not conducive to the environment getting in there. So, for reasons why it's...
Okay, any other questions? So I guess the question, and you're suggesting, Luke, that, and the question I'll ask, that it be removed from the budget. Okay? Is everybody clear on that? All in favor of removing this $10,000 from the budget? Opposed? Okay, that's defeated. That stays. So, I'm going to see any further capital. If you got another suggestion for capital? Sure.
Same vein as the
So
first
we want to
one.
hear them.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're gonna come up with a master plan for recreation, which is what we talked about on Saturday, then I think that it'd be silly to invest money in irrigation at Cameron Park, and it'd be silly to invest money in the drainage at Hollowell Park parking lot until we know exactly what we're going to do. If we're not going to use that facility over the long haul, who knows what the plan is? I want to see what the plan is before we start just dumping money wherever we want. So those two projects.
Yeah, I think, Jane, would you like to comment on that? About what?
About master plans?
Well, no, I think the two particular items that John suggested, I mean, what the implications are and why they were included.
The Cameron Park has been in there for a number of years, and I think you heard me say when I presented that it certainly would be in keeping with the service level that we are providing with our other facilities as well. Halliwell is a safety issue. It continues to be a safety issue in its current conditions with parking facilities. Again, that has been on the agenda for a number of years. Currently, we have not expanded the parking. There is kids walking around the cars. Cars are backing out onto the street. There's no sight lines at all right now. Again, it wouldn't have been put on the agenda if it wasn't a priority with our department.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
If I could
Page
just,
143, that particular project for $30,000.
if I could just add to the Halliwell comment, even if it stops being used as a soccer field, it still is public property, it's parks. The need for appropriate off-street parking will always be there.
142 and 143, that's the two projects that we're considering. I'll go to the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important to note, too, that, I mean, talking about a recreation master plan is good, and it's currently in the future capital forecast for 2016. We don't have funding in 2015 for it, so the soonest it starts is 2016. The soonest it's finished is 2017, and then implementation from there forward. So I wouldn't want to see us pause a whole bunch of community services capital projects waiting for a recreation master plan, which is years away. I would say that I know that Cameron ball diamonds can use these this irrigation, and I think that it's a good project, and I think the Hollywood project is a good project as well. And I mean, there's also with the irrigation project, it reduces staff time, allows us to use staff, and we know that we have, we've talked about reallocating staff for other projects within the Department of Community Services. Well, this frees up some staff time within the department so they can do some of those other priority projects that council would like to see and some of those maintenance projects elsewhere that we'd like to focus on. So I'm going to support keeping both of the projects in, Mr. Mayor, but yeah, that's my comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councilor Minaj.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I have a bias towards soccer. I'm on the executive, and what I can tell you is that the safety issue is real. It includes being able to successfully get an emergency medical ambulance there to help out when someone gets injured. It's all part and parcel. There's also partnership opportunities that the soccer committee doesn't have a lot of money, but they've always been willing to put some money towards that project. I'm sure that the adult population that uses Cameron Park exclusively and is going to be using town water, not a well system that the soccer people put into their parks, that we should be at least looking for a 50-cent dollar on the water irrigation project at Cameron Park.
Okay, I think we'll deal with what the suggestions were here. The first one, and any further questions? And I think probably the way to deal, there's two projects, and we'll maybe vote. Do you want to vote on them individually, John?
It doesn't matter. I mean, if it is a safety issue, I wasn't aware of that. It sounded like irrigation to me. So if it is a safety issue, I don't want to be the person that's bringing forward something that's making people unsafe. So all I'm trying to do is look through this and find savings. But yeah, if no one's interested in doing that, I still think that there's an opportunity for the irrigation.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'm offering you about $15,000 back in partnership expectations. I think you can get $5 from the soccer people, and I think you can get 50-cent dollars for the Cameron Park. I think we should be pursuing it.
Well, the question really, that's fine, Neil, but I think the question is what we're faced with here. Now, the question is, you have to support the $30,000, yes or no?
Are we going to do those two separate or together?
Well, I think we should do them separately. Yes, I suggest that. Okay. The question then is, who supports the $30,000 for the Grenville Street, Hellywelly Park, I'll say to stay, okay? Okay. Boy, oh boy, we're...
You tell us almost 10:30.
Yes, it's 10:30. It's getting short here. So, okay, the intent is, the question is, propose that we remove the $30,000 for Hellywell Park, sorry. All in favor? Opposed? That stays. The next question is, again, on the same lines, that we remove the $20,000 for Cameron Park for irrigation. All in favor of removing that? Opposed? It carries, so it's removed. That's fine. There's one other, I think, capital project that we didn't address that was suggested earlier, and that was, which would be adding lights, that was lights to the town hall. We had approved the project, the reduced project, which did not include replacing some of the lights that are going to be removed. So I don't know, I guess the suggestion before the question is going to be asked, we should have some idea of funding, and maybe Jane, you can give an idea what would be a number to do something there. Yeah.
Going by memory here from last year. Getting the finger up this way.
It's really not a way to do this because we really don't know the scope of the project and we're kind of guessing. And I hate to put you on the... Yeah.
We don't need to do this right now. I mean, there's an opportunity. This budget comes back for final approvals at committee of the whole later, and staff could stick this into a report connected to it, and we can make the decision then.
That's the way to do it. Get an idea on some options on lights, and before we finalize it, we can ask if that particular project stays or doesn't. Okay? Is that the end of capital then, or is there other suggestions? So we're going to go to operating.
So we removed the irrigation at Cameron. I hope I'm saying that right. And that puts us right now at 4.15%. So moving on to operating. At the end of the meeting that we had a couple weeks ago in January, there were a few motions that were carried which did impact the budget as it had been presented that day. So I'm just going to quickly summarize what those were that brought our total increase down to 6.28. There was a motion to continue to allocate interest earned on reserves to the tax levy, to budget for a phased-in non-union wage increase of 0.75% on January 1st and an additional 1% on July 1st. This is instead of a 2% increase effective January 1st. To remove the transfer to the facilities reserve for the $14,000 and keep that in the operating levy. To reduce the transfer to the bridge reserve down to $100,000. It was originally proposed at $190,000. To reduce the landfill capital charge proposed at $50 per property to $25, and at the same time to reduce the transfer to the expansion reserve to $75,000. And finally, to reduce the transfer to the fleet reserve, it was proposed at $605,000 to bring that back down to $585,000, consistent with the current year. Since that, there have been a few changes that staff has proposed, and also changes that really aren't discretionary. They've just sort of come out of the environment that we've in. So one of them was the benefits rate changed. In every department, we had used a percentage of 28% for full-time staff. Now that we know for sure what the year-end maximum earnings are and all the different rates for our non-discretionary benefit costs, I was able to reduce that percentage down to 27%. The ongoing legal fees related to the DC appeal were removed from the planning budget. I believe it's been reported now that that appeal has been completed and we were successful, and they will be reimbursing us for our current costs. So we took out the additional $40,000 that had been allocated for future legal fees. Within the landfill budget, and this does relate to the fleet transfer, we identified that we're currently repaying the reserves for equipment that was purchased at the landfill about 10 years ago. Those payments will fall off in 2016 and 2017. So we're recommending that we reduce the fleet transfer now by the amount of those payments, and then as those payments fall off in the future, they'll be reallocated to the fleet reserve. So there really won't be a tax impact over time. We slightly addressed the capital levy revenue, so using that $25 per property, now that we have our tax roll from MPAC, we were able to slightly increase what that would mean against the operating levy, and it's now sitting at around $200,000. And we've added $15,000 to the harbor for consulting fees for some sort of operations sustainability review or recommendation as to what the future operation of the harbor may look like. So all of those changes were incorporated in the budget that we've presented today, and along with the changes that we've just made to capital, we are sitting at a total increase of 4.15%. On the average household, that would be $51.87 a year. Combined with the county and school, we're estimating that would mean a 3.22% increase overall.
So, what we're looking for are those changes that Kate has summarized, that we kind of deal with them in one motion and accept them. Is that fine? Unless you want to pick them apart. I think go ahead.
I just want to understand what you said about the fact that now you've got the final, how did you call it? The final tax roll. Because I was prepared to have us reconsider $25 and make it be $50, but you're saying that without doing that, the numbers juggled around and is higher. So how close are we to what Stuart had originally suggested to us as an option?
That's a good question. So we do receive the final tax roll at the end of the year, and then it takes Susan some time to import that. And so recalculating what the total properties were and taking out any duplications if there was multiple contributions towards school boards, etc. Our total our total burden on the tax levy based on that new number is $18,000 for waste management, using the $25 per property figure. If we combine garbage collection, landfill, and recycling, the total operating levy that we're looking for related to those would be $18,000 in addition to the $25 per property. The contribution to the expansion reserve has been reduced to $75,000.
I think that what you're asking is that demand on the levy would have been, I think it was around 300 in total.
Yes, so if we didn't do that at all, it would be $200,000 higher. The goal is to get that number to be zero.
Yeah, so we've reduced that 200. Your question?
If I could just ask it in a different way. When Stuart first presented this, it was $50 per ratepayer, and that was a certain amount of money. What was that amount of money? Sorry, $375. $475. So when we said $25, our assumption was it was half that amount. Okay, what I heard you say was something's changed in there now. I just want to know how. So if it's still $25, are we sitting now above what we thought that would amount to? Is that what you were saying?
Yes, so as of today, there's slightly more revenue at that $25 per property than what we left off at the last meeting. And that is simply because there are a few more properties to base it on.
Okay. Everybody's got a puzzled look. Councilor Grace.
Back to the $50 versus $25 levy. If we decided to change from the $25 formula and went back to the original formula that Stuart presented, would that make any difference in the tax levy?
I would propose that we would increase the total revenue collected. We would get that overall burden from waste management down to zero, and any difference would go to the transfer to the expansion reserve. So any increase would ultimately have an $18,000 impact on the tax levy. We're still looking at a few different models for how this levy could be applied, so I would be hesitant to give you any firm numbers as far as what a $50 levy would mean or a $25 levy would mean. But currently we're estimating revenue at $25 per property to be around $200,000 a year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Remind me, Kate, so we did a couple of things. We reduced the levy to $25. We cut the transfer to the reserve. We applied the remainder to the tax levy. How much did we cut the reserve by? Can't remember. That number has left me.
100,000?
It was close to $75,000.
Yeah, I think the reserve transfer was 190 or 100.
So that left a remainder of what to the tax levy? What did we apply to the tax levy? How much money did we apply to the tax levy out of that? Just 18? No.
It was slightly more than that. It was about probably $38,000 at that time.
Okay, so we applied $38,000 to the tax levy. If we took the $38,000 from the tax levy and put it back on in the levy, how much would the levy have to be to pick up the additional $38,000?
If we were
I need smarter people than me to figure that out.
If we were to add another $20,000 back in,
yeah,
that would bring us up to 4.34.
How much would we have to raise the levy by from $25 to pick up the additional
$18,000? I would say a couple $2.
So if we take the entire burden off the tax levy, we increase the let me put this on the table, Mr. Mayor. We take the reserve transfer reduction that we already did. We do that, we keep that, and we take the entire remainder and we put it on the levy, we put it on the new levy. So, and thereby reduce the burden on the tax levy by whatever that number is.
May I suggest that rather than coming to a firm number of what that is, it being that it's around $25 now, we're going to look at a couple different models of how that gets applied, and we will bring forward several options to council before the final tax levy is billed out that will bring the total cost of waste management on the tax burden to zero. So it may be a $25 charge, it may be an $18 charge, it may be a $30 charge, but there'll be a few different models that council can choose from before it's finalized.
And that's fine, but can you say for today, Kate, if we were to just talking aggregate numbers and forgetting a specific levy number, can you say for today how much we would take off the tax levy in total dollars if we were to not have any of it on the tax levy?
Absolutely. So if we reduce that total burden to zero, our total increase would sit at 3.98%.
And how many dollars would come off the tax levy today if we did that?
$18,000.
Okay, so that's all right. So we could I would like to do that, Mr. Mayor. I pick Kate's option.
We'll get a chance to do that, and I think that's the kind of the broad idea is what we're talking here. If we approve these suggestions, we'll get the final suggestions later.
But we have, may I just be clear, Mr. Mayor, that staff hasn't suggested that, have they? Or have you? No, so we need to, so we need to add that suggestion in as direction, overall direction. That's what I would like to do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Vice Deputy Mayor.
I'm really confused now in that I thought that when we first talked about this $50 fee that then we kind of moved it down to $25, I thought that that was incredibly specific, that dollar amount would be attached to every single tax bill, and it would go very specifically into a landfill expansion fund. The way that you're talking now, it's making it sound like it's being used to fund waste management operations. That's different than the way that it was presented to us originally?
The amount that we would like to put into that landfill expansion reserve was significantly higher than what we're putting in there now.
I understand that.
So to truly fund that burden, the levy would have to be much higher. But based on the transfer to the landfill reserve that was proposed and approved at the last meeting, we can tell you, once we review the total property count, what that actual fee would have to be.
Well, I was at the last meeting, and my understanding was that that charge was going very specifically to landfill expansion, that it was not going off to so I'm very confused, and I think it's different than what we were originally presented with.
No, that isn't how I understood it. It was a combination of this levy to take the portion of the waste management that is on the levy now. I don't think I'm going to be able to explain it any better. So, and put it on at the $50, including the transfer to reserve. So it wasn't just one or the other. It was the entire package, right? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The intention, as I understood it, is to take collection and use bag tags to offset the cost of collection, but the item that we own that benefits all ratepayers, whether they throw out a bag of garbage or not, is the landfill site itself. So landfill site operations the intention is to take landfill site operations and apply a flat rate, just like we would apply the operations of water treatment plants and things through a flat rate. And so the intention is to say this benefits everybody, so everybody should pay an equal flat rate. But if you don't throw out a bag of garbage, you don't pay for pickup. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, that's a better explanation than I got out, Luke. Thanks. John, Councilor Rich.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Stu, this was your levy, right? Yeah, so I mean, this is your idea, right? What was your intention?
I was just going through the fact sheet that I presented to council at the last meeting, and what it says is that staff is proposing to implement a capital charge similar to the water and sewer flat rate To provide stable funding and recognize that a landfill must be open 12 months of the year and to provide stable funding. So the idea was to increase the transfer to reserves and offset any tax-funded needs of the landfill, so the disposal budget. Right now, the collection budget pays for itself and most of the recycling budget through bag tags, but there was nothing offsetting the cost of the disposal operation or the future landfill reserves.
You explained it better. That's what way better than I did. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm looking at this description of the proposed change, page 129 of the operating budget. So the levy was going to raise $375, the $50 per property. $375,000? It's wrong? Oh, okay. Okay, but the reserve transfer was $147,000. So that total amount was not going to be just going to the landfill reserve. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want clarification too that stipulates that we were going to put a separate item on the billing statement that said that $25 was towards future expansion of a landfill site.
That was not the intent. It was for waste management.
No, I don't agree. So I'd like to revisit.
He just. Oh, okay. How we were gonna charge it as a 25 fee, whatever we were gonna call it. I think we're gonna, right? What were we gonna call it? Waste management fee. Okay. Okay. So, is everybody clear on that now? The longer we get into this, the more confused we get. I think as the entire suggestions here, with the understanding that we're going to come back with some options about Luke's suggestion of taking that further $18,000 that is on the levy, on the tax levy, that off, and transfer it to that $25 or whatever that waste management fee will end up being per property. And some of the other suggestions really are that Kate has talked about. So I'll ask the question, all in favor of those suggested changes? Are you comfortable with that question? They're up here behind me. Yeah, they're up here behind me. For options for the waste management. Okay. Is everybody clear then? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. What next? I think we're done. You got some suggestions? Okay. Oh, we're not done yet.
Sorry, Luke, I'll just quickly, we did want to just bring the slide back. It was presented before. These were some service level changes that we have received from the public, which you may or may not want to consider in your other additions. And then we did have time now for you to make your recommendations for other changes.
We're getting close to 11 o'clock here.
I just have
Pardon?
one.
Sure, go ahead.
I just have one, and it's just a conclusion of the one I started on at the end of the last meeting, but we didn't make a decision, and that was with regard to the freezing council's operating budget at 2014 levels, its overall operating budget, and so I would like to put that back on the floor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Which would be to the tune of $10,000.
It would be a reduction of $10,000 to the levy, which okay. So there was a suggested $10,000 increase to the whole of council's budget, and Luke's suggesting that we take that $10,000 out. All in favor? All in favor? Whoop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? That's carried. Okay. There was a list of those, Kate had a list there of some service changes. I don't know, you want to discuss those individually, or has anybody got a particular suggestion? Councilor Nodge.
So comments, I have a comment on a few of them. The second one, there are some sidewalks that are difficult in discussing it with Stuart. Some road like Wellington Street, which I walk on to come to these council meetings, has a 4-foot sidewalk, and we have 5-foot sidewalk plows. So it's not getting done, and it's not going to be done until we change the road and we change the sidewalk. That's a very busy bypass using road. Everybody's using that road, and it's dangerous. I'd like to find a way to at least add that service level and find a way to clear off a 4-foot wide sidewalk instead of the approach we take today. The third one, reinstate leaf pickup services. Back in the day when I was previously a member of Port Elgin Municipal Council, we used to have people burn their leaves, and it became an asthmatic thing, an allergy thing, and a danger, both to driving through blue clouds of smoke and setting fires. We promised the residents in that day that we would purchase a sucker truck to help alleviate their problem and pick up their leaves for them if they rake them to the edge of the curb, and we did so. We bought the sucker truck, and it worked, and the residents were happy. I'd like to see us work with staff at providing a list that you can sign up to, and on a particular day, if you've got your leaves raked at the bottom of your drive on your property, on that day, our workers will work 24 hours around the clock to do it, as long as they're on the list. The next one I'd like to look at is blue box collection in the downtown cores. I'm shocked, not surprised, that some of our apartment complexes and some of our downtown businesses throw all their blue box material into the garbage. And the guys that come along with, what's the name of the company, the other company? Pardon me? No, not Basra. The garbage company. Waste Management, Miller. They pick up garbage and blue box. I've seen them do it, and it goes into the dump. I'd like to see us proactively change that behavior. Increase in winter garbage collection. Sorry, I do not want to speak to that. Weed spraying on athletic fields. The problem with the athletic fields, twofold. The daisies and the dandelions and others that flower attract insects, wasps, hornets, bees, and then our young people run around on the playing field surfaces and they get stung. EpiPens notwithstanding, it is very traumatic to watch a child get stung by a bee, and what you have to do in a hurry to... Weed spraying on athletic fields prevents that from happening. We keep the grass growing and we stop the weeds from growing. It also, second phase of that, also provides less opportunity for the weeds to get established and choke out the grass when you get uneven playing fields and you get twisted and broken ankles, and I've seen it happen, and knee sprains. These are safety issues. Winter garbage collection in parks and trails. I made a request for a couple of extra garbage cans on our trails in the wintertime. I am seeing garbage accumulate. I know it's a responsibility of the individual. They should be doing better. If we could provide them with 1 or 2 garbage cans, receptacles, I think that could make a difference. What I don't know is what I'm asking for, what that any one of those service levels are equal to, an FTE, a percentage point, I don't know. But I think that there's a number of them. If they're not all valid, the ones I've presented are valid in my mind. Thank you.
Okay. I think a couple of them, the leaf pickup and the tree pickup, you're trying to deal with through that RFP. Yes. I'll have another option on that, but the other ones I think are individual. And quite honest, why don't we leave this with staff to come up with some suggestions for us, deal with, and some costs. I think we can make the decision. In my mind, in without knowing how much it's going to cost. We just can't. Vice Deputy Mayor Hubert. I think.
Maybe, I think, Councillor Rich, I think did we make you the Basra rep? Yeah. Blue boxes get picked up in downtown Southampton, so I'm not too sure. Pardon?
Can I make a comment about
Sure,
that?
go ahead.
I'm not too
Yeah,
sure why that's
came,
there.
At one point there were, and that's not what that request is. At one point in the downtown core, Port Elgin in particular, there was blue box canisters, I'll say, with recyclables. At one point we had staff that we paid that their job was specifically to go through those because they were contaminated because people throw garbage in. Several years ago, those blue box canisters were removed. No longer that opportunity in the downtown.
Well, if that's what that refers to, I've spoken to this before. The reason why there was a lot of contamination was because we didn't put them side by side with regular garbage cans, and so as a result, somebody walking down the street, the first one that they approached, that's the one that they used. I did think that there were a couple of examples the last little while where there were side by side ones, and sure, there's because if that's what that's referring to, I'm in favor of that, but we have to do it differently so that people can make the right choice. But when we tried the blue box, that kind of blue box stuff downtown, we put them too far apart, so you just use the first one that you came to. So if that's what that's related to, I have a different opinion.
Do you have a comment, Councilor? I'm sorry, No. You sure? Yeah. Okay. Apologize for that. Yeah, I'm not. I think we need some costs on this, and perhaps you can give us some idea about that and bring it back before we suggest it. But the question, we don't even really understand what it is, yeah. Because some of them, I think there would need lots of additional information on. Okay, so is that satisfied with dealing with Neil's request that way? Is leaving it until we get some costs? Okay. Where are we at now, Kate?
As long as I'm properly understanding what we did talk about with waste management, that we are going to attempt to bring that total burden to zero in whichever way gets recommended ultimately. We are currently sitting at 3.87%.
Okay, so I guess what we need to do now is some steps forward, and I think staff, you're satisfied with where we are now, or do you want a recommendation? We've got a couple other things to decide.
So the next steps is this isn't the final. We're still at a draft stage. We're going to take this back, massage, especially those 5-year capital plans. Now that we have deferred some projects, that is going to change the timing of some other future projects. So we will make those adjustments and the few other final items, such as this waste management, different alternatives there. And then we will bring back the budget to a committee of the whole meeting in March, being the first meeting. We will look for it to be approved at that stage and then ultimately approved by bylaw at the last meeting in March.
Kate, if it is 3.87, what would the bottom line be for that combined with the county?
Combined with the county, that would be 3.09%. Combined with county and school, yes. Assuming that school comes in at zero, we don't have that number yet.
I wanted to ask the comment about adding $15,000 for consulting fees to the harbor. I'm assuming that takes the potential revenue number from the harbor down to almost zero?
That's correct. So if we look at the tally sheet that was provided, if you go down to harbor, it's brought, the current budget is sitting at $13,000 coming back to the tax levy.
Okay, very close to 11. We've had lots of discussion tonight, so I appreciate everyone's patience and lots of input. I think we need a motion to adjourn. Sorry, Don? Or did you have a question? Motion to adjourn? John, Don, and John, all in favor? We're adjourned.